Chapter 235. Gathering outside the immortal palace. This was an immortal palace, magnificent, simply beyond the imagination of mortals. It was perfectly conceivable that the status of this palace's master would also be beyond anyone's comprehension. But at this time, this palace was actually home to ghostly figures shutting back and forth and patrolling the palace. From time to time, frightening howls could be heard coming from the palace. Yi Shiwen, as if treading a rainbow, arrived near the palace and frowned. One must know that this was not the only palace on the Demon Island. Although all the other palaces were in the form of ruins, but from the wreckage, one could still find some clues. However, this was the first time he saw a perfectly preserved palace on this island, indicating that it was definitely an extraordinary place. After all, it managed to survive through endless time. Yi Shiwen was not the first expert to come here. Many experts had already arrived here. Almost 200 to 300 experts were gathered outside the Immortal Palace, and it seemed like they did not belong to any of the existing alliances. I am still not sure whether we will find stunning treasures inside this palace. Treasures, humph. I think there is something ominous lurking inside. You see, this terrain has 9 large dragon signs wrapped up in one package. It seems this has contained the Inchi in the palace for millions of years. Deducing from my geomancy concepts, I can clearly say that this so-called Immortal Palace is actually the finest dragon tomb. Do you actually think that mere Inchi can give birth to such vicious ghost soldiers? Perhaps, the King of Ghosts is buried in this tomb. A disciple put forward his theory based on geomancy. Then we may actually find some super precious stuff in there. God knows, this demon island is too weird. The civilization that lived here seemed to have faced annihilation in the past. God knows what happened to them. Anyway, seeking treasures and wealth is always risky. There is no such thing as safe adventure, and rewards are always attainable at the end of a risky adventure. A disciple said with disdain. Yi Shiwen looked at those ghost soldiers and noticed that almost all of them were the experts of Truth 3rd and 4th stage. Although they did not have the mass, but must have used some kind of unique cultivation method for souls. This was the reason why they possessed such terrifying strengths. In a while, the major alliances finally started to come one by one. The first to come was the famous Eagle Union. Several mighty experts were flying across the sky, led by a man of strong build like a young dragon, with a resolute face and an aquiline nose like an eagle. He was the chief of Eagle Union named Warhawk. Warhawk was aggressive and competitive, just like a peerless barbarian god, blazing with anger and fierceness in his eyes. No one dared to look straight into his eyes. Yi Shiwen glanced towards Warhawk, the man who firmly held his status as the chief of Eagle Union, even after the great reshuffle a few months ago. His strength was simply unimaginable. So the rumor about him being an expert of Truth 8th stage was not false. And even if he recently stepped into the 8th stage, he was still a fearful expert. Moreover, he would most likely step into 9th stage before leaving this island. This was the limit of Truth Realm that true disciples needed to reach before stepping into half-step Legendary Realm. Not to mention, even in a major force like Yuan School, there used to be only 4 pro-disciples of half-step Legendary Realm, and they were basically not considered true disciples. It was really hard to imagine that Warhawk was not even 50 years old, but still possessed such a tyrannical strength. Isn't that Eagle Union's chief Warhawk? He is so young but still has profound strength. Yes, during the reshuffle, several tyrannical chiefs were kicked out from their own alliances. Only the Eagle Union was an exception. Perhaps Warhawk's strength can be counted among the topmost hidden powerhouses of this island. He really deserves the title of Eagle Union's chief. Then there was another commotion and a group of young women arrived there. Under the bright moonlight, they looked just like a group of fairies flying in the sky. They were led by a beautiful woman, roughly 17 to 18 years old, clad in a white long skirt. She basically looked like an ice woman with curved black eyebrows, and her big eyes were twinkling and keeping an eye on everyone on the scene. She gave off the feel of an aloof woman who wouldn't allow a man near her. She was Ji Moon, the chief of Goddess Union. Goddess Union has arrived. Ji, all of them are reigning beauties. Probably the strongest and most beautiful women throughout the southeast region are centralized in this alliance. A disciple said with an amazed expression on his face. Even these so-called peerless geniuses had no alternative but to gaze upon the beauties of Goddess Union from afar. Especially Goddess Union's chief, Ji-moon. She is so beautiful, enough to cause the downfall of an entire nation. If I can get intimate with her, this life will not be in vain. Stop dreaming, man. Although we are the so-called outstanding geniuses of our respective sex, but how can we be on par with Ji-moon? She belongs to a very influential clan from Central Plains, not to mention she is very talented, and has already stepped into Truth's 7th stage. She is basically unattainable even for men like us. The Goddess Union basically included only female experts. When compared to male experts, female experts generally had vulnerable scientian states such as physical strength and whatnot. Irrespective of levels, female experts were not dominant in quantity or quality. For example, among the Pro 4 disciples of Yuan School, there was only one female disciple, Shui Yanluo, and she was not the strongest either. But there were always some exceptions who managed to break this general trend. These women were undoubtedly one of the best. No one would dare to look down on them. Purple Union has also arrived. At this time, a group of people dressed in purple robes were seen flying in the sky and rushing towards the Immortal Palace. A young guy with dignified appearance was leading them. He was as if walking in the sky, and with each step he took, he crossed several hundred meters, showing a fearful agility skill level. He was named Wang Purple, the chief of Purple Union. Outsiders might not know, but he was a star disciple of his sect, and would one day become the emperor of his kingdom. So his ambitious nature and courage could be imagined. 3 of the 4 great alliances have already arrived here, leaving only the one true union. I don't know whether their chief will make an appearance or not. It is said that he is a mysterious guy and possesses extraordinary strength, but no one has actually seen him. It doesn't matter whether he comes or not. His 2 deputy chiefs are more than enough for the job. The Great Reshuffle had given rise to 4 major alliances on the Demon Island, namely Eagle Union, Goddess Union, Purple Union, and the One True Union. The strength of each of these 4 great alliances was far more than other alliances. Hence, they were known as 4 super alliances. Eagle Alliance was an established alliance and had existed from the start. It even survived through the reshuffle, but the most mystical alliance among the super alliances was the One True Union. No one had seen its chief, and only by relying on its 2 deputy chiefs, it was ranked among the super alliances. As the experts were discussing among themselves, suddenly, there was a mighty burst of imposing aura, and the One True Union finally made an appearance. A line of dozens of mighty experts quickly rushed to the scene. But the one leading them was none other than that psycho, Jiang Hua. Yi Shiwen noticed that after resting for 2 months, Jiang Hua seemed to have fully recovered except the empty sleeve hanging in the place of his hand that was blown up by Yi Shiwen. After the 4 super alliances had arrived here in full, everyone was excited, because now they could finally start the real raid on the Immortal Palace. At this time, those ghost soldiers patrolling the palace were the biggest problem. Although Yi Shiwen was keeping a close eye on Jiang Hua, but he was not in a rush and knew that now was not the right time to take revenge. Not just Jiang Hua, but the entire One True Union would feel his wrath one day. Yi Shiwen was still furious about what happened, about their unreasonable behavior, and would certainly teach them a very simple concept. When you try to be overbearing on someone, you must first check who you are dealing with. Yi Shiwen, this palace is very ominous and is certainly not an ordinary palace. Perhaps it really is an immortal palace as the rumors say. Yi Mo said. The waves of energy leaking from the palace seem different, nothing like the ominous aura attached with ordinary dead qi. There is definitely something extraordinary hidden inside. However, at this time, other warriors could not bear the waiting and immediately wanted to go inside to seize the treasures which would surely shock the world. But soon, they got over the temptation of treasures and began to worry about the dangers that might arise inside the Immortal Palace. Though in their view, even if there was a danger inside, but since there were so many of them, so they were not afraid to take a risk. Perhaps, this courage was the so-called effect of unity is strength. However, the crowd did not rush inside for a very simple reason, because it was still night. They all knew that inchi and resentment grew stronger during the night, And these ghost soldiers might actually display 120% of their daytime strengths. In the end, they decided to wait till dawn. Chapter 236. Ghost Soldiers Cavalry. With the sunrise, the ghost soldiers would begin to lose strength and would be considerably weakened. Nighttime passed quickly while everyone was quietly waiting for the sunrise. The experts knew that they could go all out as soon as the sun rose in the eastern sky. As expected, the ghost soldiers were really weakened a lot. Attack! At this time, no one knew who shouted, but hundreds of experts instantly rushed towards the immortal palace like a mighty force advancing to pillage a nation. As soon as the ghost soldiers saw the human experts rushing towards the palace, the billowing inchi soared to the sky and formed endless clouds, sealing the sky. Grand explosions occurred one after another, again and again. The mighty force galloped, the ground trembled vigorously, and immediately in the next quarter, battalions of ghost soldiers began to emerge one after another with their imposing aura soaring to the sky. These ghost soldiers were clad in ancient iron armors and grasping iron lances in their hands. All of them were riding various types of dead demon beasts and rushing straight towards the group of experts. How can these ghost soldiers be so formidable? Damn, there are so many of them! Several experts exclaimed. However, in just a moment, a cavalry of several thousand ghost soldiers had already appeared, each having considerably high level and terrifying aura. Moreover, more and more ghost soldiers kept on appearing as if there was no end to this. There are too many of them. Moreover, why are these ghost soldiers so formidable? How do we deal with them? Their complexions suddenly changed. Why are so many of these ghost soldiers in this immortal palace? Don't tell me King of Ghosts is also among them. An expert shouted. At this time, the complexions of other experts suddenly changed. They knew well what kind of existence the King of Ghosts actually was. The so-called ghosts in this world were not the same as the ghosts in Yi Zaiwen's past life. The ghosts in this world were more evil and smart, congealed from lingering resentments and inchi, and were capable of having cultivation. But Ghost King was the scariest being among them all. It was a dreadful existence and also the commander of ghost troops. If Ghost King was really commanding this ghost cavalry, then the experts were really in danger. In fact, there was a possibility of facing complete annihilation. We have come all the way to this immortal palace. Should we really withdraw at the first sign of danger? Do you all think withdrawing now is useful? At this time, someone from the crowd shouted. The greed suddenly took over the major part of their hearts, giving rise to a desire to win this battle. Indeed, withdrawing now was simply a waste of time, effort, and such a rare opportunity. At this time, Yi Xuan thought that they made a blunder by waiting till dawn, thinking that ghost soldiers would be weakened during the day. Indeed, they were weakened, but the sudden emergence of thousands of ghost soldiers' cavalry was really beyond their calculations. The inchi was soaring in the sky and dense ink like black clouds was spread in the sky, blocking the sunlight thoroughly and invoking terror in the hearts of people present there. Yi Xuan felt as if he was standing on the set of a horror movie. The ghost cavalry, comprising of thousands of ghost soldiers, was rushing towards the experts. The soldiers were shouting and looked glorious in their shining black armors. There was a flood of killing intentions in the sky, and it seemed as if the whole world was shaking in the presence of this mighty cavalry. This scene was very shocking. Thousands of ghost soldiers were galloping and radiating large mass of dark inchi towards the sky. It seemed as if a mighty tide of iron and steel was coming towards the experts, destroying and crushing anything in its way. The cold wind howled. The towering old trees were uprooted and disintegrated into bits, while the leaves as if performed a chaotic dance in the air, and scattered in all directions. This was a mighty force that swept everything in its way. In fact, even the heavy boulders that came in the way of this cavalry couldn't withstand the impact, and simply turned into dust. Nothing could stop this cavalry as they were advancing with the spears to the front, fully prepared to destroy all visible matter in the path. But even such a terrific scene was unable to suppress the excitement and greed towards immortal treasures, and the experts also rushed forward. However, they wouldn't dare to underestimate the enemy. Bang! 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 Several experts on the forefront were instantly blasted away with the first impact of the ghost cavalry, and died on the spot. Several experts were injured and were spewing out blood from their mouths, while several others were torn to shreds and instantly lost their lives. The ghost soldiers were roaring again and again. The ghost soldiers condensed dead chi in their hands, then seized several experts and directly crushed them to death. It seemed as if a terrible force swept past like a surging black tide. Bang! 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 After some time, the cavalry finally slowed down, and the experts also got a chance to display their best attacks. A cavalry's biggest advantage is its running speed, and once slowed down, it is almost similar to being trampled upon by the opposite side. These experts were not ordinary people, but a group of peerless geniuses. Each and every one of them possessed secret martial arts. Once they began the slaughter, the scenario suddenly changed on the battlefield. Several ghost soldiers were immediately killed by the experts and directly turned into mist, changing back into resentments. "Let's go, brothers!" Warhawk shouted loudly, and leading the members of Eagle Union, he flew towards the palace. The ghost soldiers who tried to come in their way were instantly slaughtered, and within seconds, hundreds of ghost soldiers had been annihilated. The experts of Goddess Union also started to catch up, not to mention their battle efficiency was truly intrepid and simply unimaginable. The ghost soldiers didn't stand a chance in front of these beauties. The ghost cavalry was caught off guard, and human experts took this opportunity to run past them in the direction of Immortal Palace. Bang! But at this time, endless thundering sounds transmitted in the surroundings, and the experts saw thousands of ghost soldiers rushing out from the Immortal Palace. "My turn!" Wong Purple waved his hand, and suddenly appeared a large imperial ghost-like figure behind him. It instantly threw an imperial jade seal that malicious fell towards the ghost cavalry. Boom! With a loud noise, the imperial jade seal fell down like a heavy mountain, and caused a massive explosion. This led to the annihilation of hundreds of ghost soldiers. The ghost soldiers simply did not stand a chance in front of such a potent attack. Yi Shiwen recognized the technique that Wong Purple used just now. It was called Martial Emperor, and the practitioners used this method to release mighty dragon chi. Not to mention, dragon chi was basically positive energy, hence the natural nemesis of ghost soldiers. Just like Yi Shiwen's coiling dragon palm. Jianghua also shot his palm and released a huge divine beam of light, which fell down upon ghost cavalry and killed many. His tyrannical strength had not decreased even after losing a hand. On the contrary, there was a slight improvement in his strength. And at this time, Ji-moon also attacked by shooting waves of divine beams towards the ghost cavalry and killing many in one fell swoop. Under the leadership of these four leaders, the human expert party swept all the way inside. The experts didn't have time to waste on exclaiming in bewilderment, and quickly rushed towards the palace door. After storming all the way to the Immortal Palace, the experts saw that the palace door was tightly closed. Earlier, the ghost cavalry had directly passed through this door, but humans could not go inside like this. "Let's go!" At this time, a long spear appeared in Warhawk's hands. An eagle's cry resounded everywhere, and a golden eagle came out of the spear fluttering its golden wings and flew straight towards the palace door at an incredible speed. Boom! The golden eagle directly crashed on the palace door, and cracks began to surface on the seemingly indestructible door. Its supernatural power was simply comparable to the demon beasts. Boom! 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 Loud explosions reverberated everywhere, and the main door of Immortal Palace quickly collapsed. Everyone was dumbfounded and gaping at Warhawk in astonishment. His attack was incredible and could easily kill the experts of Truth 7th stage. Having such power and cultivation was difficult to imagine. Boom! With a loud rumble, the main door of Immortal Palace directly collapsed into pieces. However, no one got a chance to celebrate because all of a sudden, a mighty current of innumerable ghost soldiers swept towards them from the inside. Warhawk didn't show the slightest hint of fear, and his long spear instantly released countless golden eagles towards the ghost soldiers. The attack was very effective and annihilated large numbers of ghost soldiers. This Warhawk is really incredible, damn. No wonder he has maintained his status as the chief of Eagle Union. No one here can beat this guy. He is far more than an ordinary expert. Just look at how he is single-handedly sweep through the enemy lines. Such a person is simply an inborn evildoer/monster. Kill! Yes, all we need is to kill some ghost soldiers and make a way through the cavalry, then we can obtain immortal treasures. The hidden treasures of Immortal Palace once again induced greed in everyone's heart, giving rise to an infinite power and courage in their hearts, and they suddenly rushed inside the palace. Yi Shiwen also swept all the way inside while his whole body was wrapped around by a coiling dragon, and those ghost soldiers simply couldn't get close to him. But since he was flying behind the other human experts, therefore, no one noticed that there was one more peerless killer god among them who was actually the natural nemesis of these ghost soldiers. Chapter 237. Hairy Zombies. Yi Shiwen swept all the way inside following the group of other experts while simultaneously killing the ghost soldiers that were coming from behind. Although other experts were enticed by the immortal treasures, but Yi Shiwen was not like them and was maintaining his calm. In his opinion, one can be excited while doing something, but too much of anything is not good. One must never be irrational and always act with reason. Kill. Battle cries echoed everywhere inside the palace, and ghost soldiers rushed forward to stop the intruders. These ghost soldiers are strange, but there are still some differences between them and the ones we saw in the Yellow River. Yi Shiwen calmly analyzed without losing his head like other experts. The ghost soldiers kept on coming like endless tides. No matter how many of them were killed by the experts, there was no end. This was normal since these soldiers did not have mass and were formed out of inchi and killing intentions. Inchi was abundant inside the Immortal Palace and endlessly producing ghost soldiers. Human experts rushed towards the depths of Immortal Palace and slaughtered countless ghost soldiers along the way. Yi Shiwen was not far behind them and suddenly saw a large pool of blood on the floor. According to his estimate, at least several dozen experts had been seriously injured by the ghost soldiers. While advancing towards the palace depths, it took half a day's worth of effort to finally get rid of those ghost soldiers. The experts team had serious losses, with each super alliance losing several members, not to mention a lot of the dead experts belonged to unknown sections. They finally arrived in the inner chambers of the palace. The palace looked enormous from the outside, but was even enormous and very spacious on the inside. Some kind of space matrix method was used to increase the size of the palace from inside, by expanding the space itself. Yi Shiwen was not in a hurry, and was slowly advancing while keeping a nominal distance from the team of experts. He was like a grown-up looking at some kids as they were rushing in excitement to get candies. Then, abruptly, there came intermittent waves of terrible screams, resembling shrill cries of a fighter. It caught Yi Shiwen's attention all of a sudden, and he was surprised to see several hairy zombies running amok everywhere. These zombies had thin physiques and were holding lances and long spears in their hands. They were clad in iron armors and their whole bodies were covered with long black hair. They looked grim and horrifying with their glowing fangs, and were continuously releasing ominous inchi from their bodies. Whenever soldiers died in this immortal palace, they would rise again as zombie soldiers and would forever stay in the control of this palace, all the while unable to reincarnate. Yi Shiwen held his breath when he saw this scene. These hairy zombies were incapable of thinking, had no self-control or reasoning ability, and only lived as walking dead in the endless desire of blood. They didn't age, didn't extinguish, couldn't die, and were basically abandoned by the three realms. Not to mention, they weren't allowed into the 6 reincarnations cycle, making them destitute, helpless and homeless for eternity. Their bodies were stiff and they instinctively blamed the entire world. Living as dead in endless solitude, they loathed all living creatures and only longed for blood. The zombies had practiced copper skin iron bone cultivation method, and the long hair on their bodies was acting like an incredibly tough protective layer. The toughness of their hair armor was higher than that of a copper steel frame. Not to mention, all of them had high cultivation levels. When all these attributes were taken into consideration, no wonder even the strongest attacks from the human experts didn't injure the zombies. These zombies were not just the collection of inchi like the ghost soldiers. Instead, they were originally mere corpses that soaked inchi for countless years to grow the impenetrable hair armor. In addition to that, they moved on killing instincts and held endless hatred towards the living. But the good news was that they were all lower-level zombies and didn't possess wisdom or consciousness. Otherwise, they could easily massacre the entire team of experts in one fell swoop. Even so, the human expert party faced severe losses. More than a dozen experts were directly stabbed by the lances and nailed to the ground. Although there were many cut wounds on the bodies of the zombies, but they simply did not feel pain or fear, making them very terrifying. Yi Shiwen was carefully observing the zombies and noticed that although their armors and helms were damaged, but there was no damage to the hair armor. Yi Shiwen shot his palm. A huge dragon flew towards a zombie and tore it into two halves, then crushed its core. It happened so quickly that the zombie didn't even get a chance to struggle. When other experts saw how Yi Shiwen killed a zombie, they finally got to know how to deal with the zombies. It was unusually hard to kill them, but now they knew that they were heading in the wrong direction altogether. They just needed to crush the zombie core to kill a zombie. Zombie core was similar to demon core. Thanks to Yi Shiwen, now the experts knew how to deal with this situation. After all, they had never dealt with zombies before. Yi Shiwen, something is off here. Yi Mo said, the concentration of Inchi is really strong. Look at this, so many zombies have gathered here. Now just imagine the amount of Inchi required for producing so many zombies. In general, it was very difficult to produce zombies, and the production method simply went against the heaven's will. A zombie was not allowed in any of the realms, including heaven, so one could imagine the tragedy they must face in their eternal lifespan. However, the zombies could not just breed out of Inchi, and in the presence of sunlight, this process was simply impossible. Only in a tomb with its own spiritual pulse for gathering Inchi, the mass production of zombies was possible. Emperors often chose such a feature in their tombs to protect their tombs from the raiders. Ancient legends said that emperors of ancient times would dig their own tombs in advance. They would choose a valuable land with good geomantic design, having an endless amount of lingqi being supplied from the dragon veins. These were necessary conditions to breed ferocious zombies in a period of hundreds of years. Gene officers knew the means to avoid the traps and mechanisms inside the tombs, but even they could not escape from the zombies. The zombies never discriminated when it came to killing, and were extremely brutal. Once the tomb was dug open, they would come out to cause havoc. And in the troubled times, when the authorities did not act in time, the area of several hundred miles around the tomb would become desolate in the zombie apocalypse. Therefore, ordinary people despised the very work line of gene officers, who usually died without an heir. The ordinary tombs on the earth were nothing like the tombs of this world. Perhaps, even the original tomb of the first emperor did not have such a frightening presence when it was unearthed. Very harsh conditions were required to give birth to the zombies, but the presence of so many zombies here was a result from the availability of bodies of the dead soldiers. Not to mention, a massive amount of Inchi was present here that could easily breed countless zombies. This palace is not really a peerless dragon tomb as we thought. Yi Mo said in a somewhat doubtful manner because the palace interiors did not look like a tomb. A great master has most likely died here, and after his death, a tomb spontaneously formed at his resting place. The death of a great master will immediately promulgate a law that will automatically give rise to a tomb at the place where he fell. Yi Mo said. The blood from the bodies of wounded zombies and killed experts mixed thoroughly to form a river of blood. Yi Shiwen was walking in this river of dark red blood, constantly killing zombies and fiercely fighting with many of them at once. Suddenly, the commander of the hairy zombies appeared. His strength was quite tyrannical, though far worse than his real strength when he used to be alive, but after becoming a zombie, now he possessed tyrannical flesh, and it was very difficult to deal with him. Warhawk immediately stepped forward to deal with him. His mighty roar echoed as he rushed towards the zombie commander. Roar! A formidable zombie roared and leaped towards Yi Shiwen. It suddenly brandished its lance, and a dreadful cold and poisonous dead qi, in the form of a gorgeous beam of light, flew towards Yi Shiwen. This zombie was very strong, and was actually at the peak of Truth 6th stage. Yi Shiwen bellowed and stretched out his hand, releasing rays of golden light as if flooding towards that zombie. At this time, Yi Ziwen looked just like the reincarnation of an ancient sun god. Yi Shiwen caught the poisonous dead qi in his hand and crushed it. Then he jumped forward, arrived in front of the zombie in a flash and directly kicked on its stiff chest. Boom! Its sternum was directly shattered by this kick, and its whole body was sent flying, crashed into a pillar and heavily fell to the ground. Roar. However, it obviously was not willing to give up. It again discharged poisonous dead qi towards Yi Shiwen. But this poisonous dead qi couldn't possibly break through the protective layer of Zhenyuan on Yi Ziwen's body. Right now, his battle strength was at the peak of Truth 7th stage, so the zombie simply didn't stand a chance. Yi Shiwen, kill it, Yi Mo said. These zombies were nothing but corpses filled with hatred for all living beings. They were banned from stepping into 6th samsara cycle, and were basically tired of living on like this. Yi Shiwen was doing the right thing by killing them and freeing their souls in the process. Yi Shiwen lifted his foot and stamped on the zombie's head. Its head instantly exploded along with the disintegration of its core. Yi Shiwen did not stop and proceeded to slay other zombies. Well, as my hometown gladly welcomed the first rains of the season, all of the farmers were dancing around with joy. But it went out of hand when God of Rain decided to have fun and poured too much love over my hometown. Floods and landslides are now a big issue, and power cut is the worst one that I have been dealing with this whole week. Sorry for fewer releases. I will make sure to compensate once I am out of this mess. Thanks for reading the whole message, Drenched Novice. Chapter 238. Contest for a Dao book. The situation got intense and far beyond the imagination of the experts. They never expected to find so many ghost soldiers and terrifying hairy zombies inside the immortal palace. Damn it, this is simply a peerless tomb. Where is that son of a bitch who said this palace has a peerless treasure trove? An expert could not control his anger and curse out loud. Now they were at their limits and basically frustrated. After all, they were considered peerless geniuses and still faced so much difficulty dealing with the dead. Not to mention several experts were not even able to enter the immortal palace. A total of more than 1,000 experts broke into the palace, but only after experiencing so many causalities, they came to realize why the Demon Island was called Genius Meat Grinder. However, although these zombies were very powerful but were not as violent as these experts. Although there were hundreds of casualties in the human expert team, but the zombies and ghost soldiers had more casualties. As they continued to go all the way inside, more and more ghost soldiers and zombies appeared in large numbers because of the entanglement of resentment and lingqi, raising corpses of the soldiers back from the dead. Yi Shiwen and the others finally arrived in a hall, only to see corpses lying everywhere on the floor. These corpses had not yet transformed into zombies, but it could be seen that they were rotting for a long time. Several corpses had already decayed to the point of leaving behind piles of bones. Many bones were actually corroded as if swept by the aftermath of a large attack, crushing several bones to dust. The experts encountered several skeleton monsters on the way, but nothing could stop them from advancing. Working together as a team, they continued to rush all the way inside. Yi Shiwen had a kind of bad feeling in his heart because the soldiers who died in this palace either turned into ghost soldiers, skeletons or zombies. If the ruler of this immortal palace was preserved in this tomb, and his corpse turned out to be fully intact, then what if he suddenly rose back from the dead? Then they would be in huge trouble. But they were already here, so they did not have an alternative but to advance further. Fortunately, however, before his doubts evolved any further, they finally arrived in an open hall. And in the center of this spacious hall, a dignified-looking man was sitting cross-legged and calmly looking into the distance as if disdainfully looked down on all the living beings. Everyone suddenly stopped and did not dare to approach. Being cautious was essential since there were really too many strange things on this island, and they had gotten used to being wary all the time. After a long time of observation, Warhawk suddenly said, "He is already dead." At this time, everyone relaxed and even they felt that although this man looked kind of invincible, but had no aura or presence, he was not even releasing ice-cold breath like the zombies. Everyone at this moment was finally relieved. A cold wind blew out of nowhere, and the whole body of this man suddenly turned into a pile of sand and flew together with the wind. He died in a seated posture. Everyone was astonished and could not believe their eyes. This was something only legendary beings with good fortune could achieve. It was said that as long as the corpses of mighty experts were left behind, there was a possibility that they might rise from the dead. Therefore, using the seated posture method was a way out. And so there was a myth about the powerhouses that they would always be considered a legend in life and death. Even if they died, they would not decay or disappear like ordinary people. It was said that since they possess formidable strength, even the experts of Truth Realm could directly evolve into zombies if their corpses were left intact. Although the possibility was minimum and would be close to zero if placed under the sun, after all, these were just myths, and recognition from the world principles was also necessary. But once turned into zombies, the whole world would face a big disaster. The seniors would refuse to acknowledge their families, and some sects suffered heavy losses because of this, finally leading to their complete decline. Moreover, letting the corpse of a senior turn into a zombie was undoubtedly equivalent to causing great disrespect. Therefore, some people chose to die in a sitting posture, but this occurred only in the myths, and only legendary level characters could perform it. Now that the experts saw this with their eyes, they could not help but feel excited. Because when someone died in a sitting posture, the world principles comprehended by him would be blown off in a massive explosion. If at that time someone stood by their side and came in contact with these principles, then they would obtain enormous benefits. Of course, this man should have died countless years ago, so what they saw was only a wisp of what could have been his real corpse. But this scene was still enough to shock them. After the man's figure faded in the wind, everyone saw a book made of unknown metal lying on the ground. It had only a few thin pages, but it was exuding fluctuating Tao patterns. They immediately understood that this book definitely contained an earth-shattering martial power technique, and not just recorded, but still emitting waves of Tao patterns. From this itself, one could imagine the level of martial technique recorded in this book. But everyone was standing calm, no one dared to go forward, fearing that they would end up in a dispute, and someone else might benefit as the third party. This Tao book is mine. Suddenly, Warhawk stepped forward grasping his eagle spear, and instantly rushed towards the Tao book to seize it. Give up the idea. How dare you? Dream on. Suddenly, several experts shouted and various martial attacks aimed at Warhawk from behind. Bye! The loud cry of a giant golden eagle resounded in the hall. It extended its wings to block the incoming attacks and protect Warhawk, and then flew towards the Tao book to clutch it in its claws. But at this time, the experts who attacked Warhawk were unable to control themselves and rushed forward. If they did not act now, then the book would fall into the hands of Warhawk. Bold, how dare you claim this book as if it belongs to you? The book belongs to me. At this time, Wang Purple instantly shot his jade seal towards Warhawk to suppress him. Boom! Warhawk instantly drew back to dodge, and the jade seal fiercely crashed into the floor and opened a huge hole. Bastard! You really want to become one true Union's enemy? At this time, Jianghua also jumped into the skirmish and congealed a big hand that instantly went forward to grasp the book. Whoosh! The sound of an arrow echoed when Ji Moon shot an arrow, and it instantly punctured into that big hand and made it explode. Now everyone was involved in this so-called contest for the Tao book, without even knowing its contents or what kind of secret technique was described in it. Was it really a Tao book or something else? Perhaps there were not many of such type of Tao books in Wuxia. Tao books were generally used to record marvelous techniques. Otherwise, just recording the technique would not cause such fluctuations patterns. In fact, a legendary book like this had never been seen before, even by the higher-ups of their sections. However, they certainly would not let go of such an item. Clang, zhang, bang. Various terrifying explosive sounds echoed throughout the hall. No need to mention Warhawk and the other super experts were the fastest and strongest. Yi Shiwen was watching from a distance and was not in a hurry. He did not want to get involved and was silently observing them like a poisonous snake in the dark, ready to attack anytime and anywhere. This was the first time the leaders of the four alliances fought, and were going all out at this moment. Earlier, they used to have opposite understanding and did not get involved in meaningless fights, but now, the situation was entirely different. The leaders of the strongest alliances were bound to participate in this kind of contest to see who was the strongest, and it finally occurred. Hundreds of experts had initially jumped into the skirmish, but this only reached a deadlock. In the end, other than the four super experts, everyone else backed down and no longer dared to come in their way. Taking advantage of the confusion, An expert of truth third stage rushed forward and extended his hand to grab the Tao book. But suddenly, a huge enchantment barrier appeared around the book and sent him flying. His blood spattered and he fell unconscious. Go away, this Tao book is mine. Warhawk was in a rage and roared again. Blue veins appeared on his muscular hands as he threw his eagle spear towards the Tao book. Whoosh! There came a loud and shrill piercing sound as the eagle spear flew towards the Tao book. Bang! The spear fiercely stuck on the book's enchantment barrier. Boom! A huge explosion took place when the enchantment was abruptly punctured by the eagle spear. Then it fell down and nailed to the top of a high tower. This stirred up everyone because they knew that right when the enchantment was broken, the contest finally arrived in its final stage. Warhawk suddenly transformed into a golden eagle, flew up and dived towards the Tao book. Shwa! Everyone watched as he directly grabbed the book in his hands, but at this time, a slender hand caught one page of the book. Chapter 239. Showdown with Jianghua. Brother Warhawk, I have heard you come from a famous prestigious clan. I am sure you don't lack such Tao books, might as well give it to me. A sweet voice of Ji Moon sounded in Warhawk's ears. Get lost! Warhawk shouted. His golden Zhen Yuan burst out of his body and rushed towards her. He did not show even a shred of tender affection towards this lovely girl. Rather, there was decisive killing intention hidden in this attack. This book must be handed over to our one true union. A big hand clutched down towards the book. I will see who dares to stop me. Wang Purple shot a divine beam towards the others. All attacks hit simultaneously on the Tao book. Boom! The terrifying explosion tore the book open, and 4 pages fluttered out in the air. There were only 4 pages in this Tao book. At this time, Jianghua and others no longer entangled in battle, and rushed towards the 4 pages, each aiming for 1 page of the Tao book. Once they were done seizing the Tao book's pages, they saw the recorded secret technique, and could not help but get excited all of a sudden. Although Jianghua was a step slower than the other 3 super experts, but that did not prevent him from seizing a page. However, before he could see the secret technique recorded in it, there came a loud dragon roar and a huge shadow dived towards him. Bold! Who dares to mess with one true union? Jianghua suddenly got furious and turned around to slap his palm towards that huge shadow. It was actually a coiling dragon. His palm collided with the huge coiling dragon and instantly destroyed it. At this time, he finally looked at the page in his other hand only to find out that it was no longer in his hand. The Tao book's page had already been snatched by a blue figure, yes, by Yi Shiwen. Jianghua's pupils suddenly contracted and he shouted crazily. It's you! I have been here all along, but it seems Deputy Chief Jiang did not notice me. Yi Shiwen indifferently said. At this time, the other 3 super experts stopped fighting, because they knew that continuing to fight did not make sense. Each person won a page of the Tao book, so it was a win-win situation for all. If you are too greedy and want to monopolize all the benefits, then you end up ruining everything. As for the others, they simply did not stand a chance against these super experts and could only accept this outcome bitterly. Actually, right now, everyone was curiously looking at Yi Shiwen. This guy was really courageous, actually dared to challenge Jianghua and won true union. I am surprised to see that you actually dare to appear in front of me. Jianghua's eyes instantly revealed signs of extreme hatred. The usual indifferent expression on his face was now replaced by a vicious, crazed expression. The culprit who destroyed his hand was standing right in front of his eyes, so how could he possibly stay calm? Why should I not dare to appear in front of you? Yi Shiwen looked coldly at Jianghua and said, Have you forgotten what I said back then? I shall teach you and your one true union a valuable lesson about why you shouldn't have fucked with me. The anger could be seen burning intensely in Yi Ziwen's eyes as he stared at Jianghua. Both sides were equally burning with hatred. Some experts remembered hearing rumors about Jianghua chasing down an expert and losing an arm in the fight. Could this guy be the one who blasted Jianghua's arm? Such a vicious enmity was far more than ordinary. Quickly hand over the page. Do you actually think that someone like you can have it? A member of One True Union stepped forward and said, It seems that Deputy Chief Jiang needs a man like you to do his bidding. And do you really think that it's just a matter of 1 page of Tao book? Yi Shiwen grinned and said, "Shut up and hand over the page, otherwise killing you won't be a tough task." Another member of One True Union said, "No need to waste your breath on a dead man. He has dared to provoke our alliance, so he is already a dead man." A master of the Truth Sixth Stage said in an authoritative manner, although he was just an ordinary member of One True Union, but he used to be the leader of an alliance before reshuffling, and held enough influence. He immediately rushed forward and his hand transformed into a big hand, and stretched out to arrest Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen just flicked his finger. Puff! In an instant, everyone saw that disciple screaming pitifully and his entire arm was torn off, leaving behind a pool of blood on the floor. He was squealing loudly like a pig. Yi Shiwen took one step and instantly disappeared in front of everyone. He instantly dashed into the crowd of One True Union, and had already recognized the faces of those who were mocking and insulting him a while ago. Puff! 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 Almost in a flash, several disciples of One True Union were attacked by Yi Shiwen, and were chopped into pieces. They never saw him coming and were suddenly overawed. It took some time to realize that he messed with the wrong guy. However, it was too late because now they had no choice but to stand there like pigs and obediently wait to be butchered by this peerlessly ruthless man. Moreover, this scene acted as a deterrent for several other experts who were planning on stealing the page from Yi Shiwen later on. But after witnessing this carnage, they would never dare to even dream about messing with him. One must know that One True Union mostly consisted of experts of Truth 5th Stage and 6th Stage, but in the face of this Death Reaper, they certainly did not stand a chance. In fact, there was no room for any fight back. Warhawk and the other super experts were also earnestly watching the whole scene and suddenly frowned. They never knew that a formidable expert like Yi Shiwen was present among them. In their eyes, Yi Shiwen became a reckless guy who was decisive, brave and formidable. These few moments were enough to make them consider him as an equal. In this world, strength was not only the ultimate law, but also the ultimate justice. In this world, only strong were revered. Jiang Hua was stunned for a moment, and within this one moment, Yi Shiwen had already butchered several of his subordinates. His face turned blue with anger as he shouted, "You are courting death! You don't understand what you have done. From now on, you won't have a place to hide on the entire Demon Island." As his voice fell, his big hands stretched out and shot a huge mountain of divine light aimed at Yi Shiwen. Compared to 2 months ago, he was now much more tyrannical and his practice speed was far beyond the imagination of ordinary experts. However, how could he ever compare with Yi Shiwen? Yi Shiwen shot his palm and released a coiling dragon that roared and flew directly towards the mountain of divine light, and tore it pieces. Yi Shiwen jumped towards Jiang Hua, while at the same time, his skin turned golden in color making him appear just like an ancient overlord reborn. His power completely burst out, and paled the complexions of all the experts present on the scene. How could this guy have such extraordinary strength? His strength was not one bit inferior to that of Warhawk and the other super experts. Even Jiang Hua was surprised to no limit. After all, in just 2 months, Yi Shiwen actually managed to grow so powerful. His own practice speed simply could not rival with Yi Shiwen's. Last time, it had been so difficult for Jiang Hua to deal with Yi Shiwen, and also lost an arm when there was a difference of 2 levels between the two. But now Yi Shiwen was clearly much stronger than before, although he himself progressed a lot in the last 2 months, and was on the verge of breaking through to the Truth 8th Stage. If he managed to step into the 8th Stage, then he wouldn't be afraid of anyone on this island. Then he would have sufficient power to run amok like those super experts. But before he could have a breakthrough, he once again clashed with Yi Shiwen. Moreover, Yi Shiwen was now much more tyrannical than 2 months ago. Thinking of this, an intense killing intention flashed in his bloodshot eyes. Jiang Hua shouted and congealed a sierra of divine light, so big that there literally was no escape route for Yi Shiwen. This was a battle of life and death, and both of them were aware of that. Under Jiang Hua's command, the huge sierra of divine light descended towards Yi Shiwen. This was the same attack he used last time, but this time, it was more powerful and frightening. Yi Shiwen also displayed the progress he made in the last 2 months, and sent his coiling dragon towards the descending sierra. The coiling dragon as if devoured the sierra of divine light almost instantly, and this caused a massive explosion in the hall. Last time, Jiang Hua had an overwhelming superiority in the battle, but this time, the tables turned in Yi Zaiwen's favor, and Jiang Hua was completely suppressed. Boom! The killing intention spread in all directions, and Yi Shiwen went all out, displaying various martial art techniques one after another without restraint. Jiang Hua also felt the crisis and went all out, displaying various martial techniques. He lifted his hand and a mountain of divine light transformed into a sword and instantly swept towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen did not dodge, just stood there like a mountain. Jiang Hua had clearly been completely suppressed by him, but he did not have any relaxation. He did not want to give any chance to Jiang Hua, and decided to end this as fast as possible. Yi Zaiwen's gilded tyrant form was working at its best. He just stretched out his palm and effortlessly caught the sword of divine light. Chapter 240, Heavenly Phoenix Regeneration Technique. Boom! The sword of divine light was directly crushed by Yi Shiwen. He just stood there as if nothing happened. Then he suddenly rushed forward. Both sides attacked maliciously and engaged in a fearsome battle. Not good. Jiang Hua noticed that Yi Zaiwen's tyrant body had also leveled up in the last 2 months, and now he did not stand a chance against it. Yi Shiwen arrived in front of Jiang Hua and thrust his palm. Bang! His palm pounded on Jiang Hua's chest and shattered his sternum. He screamed pitifully and spat a mouthful of blood, while simultaneously retreating several dozen meters to escape from Yi Zaiwen's next attack. Jiang Hua was literally shocked to death. He never thought that there would be such a huge disparity between their strengths. Last time, he was the one who completely suppressed Yi Shiwen, and this time, the exact opposite was happening. He was depressed and felt like vomiting blood. But at this time, Yi Zaiwen's attacks became more and more intense. His hands transformed into a dragon sword and stabbed towards Jiang Hua. Yi Zaiwen's command, over the skills he had practiced, was so profound that it left everyone stunned. Poof! Jiang Hua couldn't dodge and failed to block Yi Zaiwen's sword attack, as a result of which, his other arm was also chopped off by Yi Shiwen. After practicing gilded tyrant form up to 50%, Yi Zaiwen's flesh had become so formidable that his punches and kicks were enough to explode his opponents. Jiang Hua was enduring severe pain, but he still somehow congealed a massive sierra of divine light and shot towards Yi Shiwen. Ha! Yi Shiwen used his hands to tear the sierra to shreds and immediately rushed towards Jiang Hua. Yi Shiwen was not sticking to his moves or usual fighting style. He began to understand his own path and felt the blood boiling in his body. He heard the roars of a vicious dragon as if coming from his own body. Yi Shiwen sneered. "Today you die." Yi Zaiwen's hands moved slightly and 2 coiling dragons suddenly soared up, entangled together, and dived towards Jiang Hua. Boom! The 2 dragons bulldozed Jiang Hua as he severely fell to the ground and the entire palace trembled. Stone fragments were sent flying in all directions. A huge crater appeared in the floor while Jiang Hua could not endure anymore when all the bones in his body shattered into pieces and punctured his flesh internally. Everyone was stunned watching this scene. Yi Shiwen was ridiculously powerful. They originally felt that he was very strong but probably not as strong as the super experts. But after witnessing this battle, they were forced to change their opinions. Within moments, he crushed a tyrannical expert like Jiang Hua. Jiang Hua screamed as blood oozed out of the numerous tiny holes on his body. Suddenly, his whole body was enveloped in some kind of scarlet light. He apparently used a secret technique to escape. At this time, Yi Shiwen stretched out his hand and directly grasped the ball of scarlet light. Poof! Jiang Hua was directly caught by Yi Shiwen and crushed to death. Everyone froze and their faces revealed dumbfounded expressions. Jiang Hua, a deputy chief of Wanchu Union, was crushed to death by Yi Shiwen. This was a huge loss for Wanchu Union, because they not only lost face by losing their deputy chief and several elite experts, but also lost an opportunity to obtain the Audiobook's page. A high-level expert was effortlessly killed by Yi Shiwen. Now they knew that Jiang Hua was never a match of Yi Shiwen. This was going to stir up the entire Wanchu Union, and it would make things difficult for Yi Shiwen. After all, Jiang Hua was one of the 2 deputy chiefs, not to mention their mysterious leader was still around. when Jiang Hua was strong enough to stand side by side with the other super experts, then one could imagine the strength of this mysterious leader. So it could be said that although one true union faced big loss, but this was not enough to cripple them. However, this incident was enough to prove the ruthlessness of Yi Shiwen. Now no one would dare to mess with him. At this time, Yi Shiwen appeared extremely horrifying to everyone, and his imposing aura was also monstrous. Yi Shiwen was not in a rush, just crossed hands behind his back and stood there like a mountain. His very presence was overbearing and unparalleled. This Tao book was the most precious item in this immortal palace, but now that it was divided among 4 tyrannical experts, no one wished to stay here, and dispersed to search the other parts of this enormous palace. Warhawk and Wang Purple soon left. Only Ji Moon arrived in front of Yi Shiwen, smiled gracefully and said, "Considering what we saw today, I am afraid the news about Brother Ye's invincible strength will soon spread throughout the Demon Island." "Fairy Maiden is flattering me," Yi Shiwen politely said. He was such a person, kind for kind, ruthless for ruthless. It is easy to be disrespectful to others, but takes a big heart to respect them. A person who doesn't know compassion can only respond with arrogance to the politeness shown to them. I have come to know that there are some misgivings between our deputy chief Lu Yueru and Brother Yi. I hope Brother Yi can spare her and not punish her too severely," Ji Moon said. Yi Shiwen suddenly understood why she suddenly came to him. He did not know that Lu Yueru actually joined Goddess Union, but he did not care. Nothing big happened between him and her. His direct enmity was with Xiao Zhen, not her. She and I have no enmity, some misunderstanding and nothing more, Yi Shiwen said. "That's good. If you have free time later, our Goddess Union will gladly welcome you," Ji Moon said respectfully, and elegantly flew away. Yi Shiwen did not follow experts to other parts of the immortal palace. He sat cross-legged on the spot, and began to examine the page. There were ancient scriptures written all over the page. Since he only got one page, some of the information was divided, but he figured that the Tao book definitely belonged to a peerless ancient influence. Stunning Taoist skills were recorded in the book, and on the page seized by Yi Shiwen, the skill recorded was called Phoenix Regeneration Technique. It was a technique born out of Phoenix comprehension, and granted the magical ability of repairing any injury to the practitioner. For example, he could heal all the injuries he got 2 months ago within few breaths with the help of this technique. In fact, he could also regrow cut-off body parts. Of course, this was going to be possible only after perfecting it, but he had the mysterious space, so it shouldn't be a problem. It would just require consumption of many Ling Dan. Yi Shiwen suddenly held his breath. How was it possible for such a Taoist skill to exist? If he had this skill 2 months ago, then he didn't need to escape from Jianghua. It could be described as the supreme divine technique of life insurance. This divine technique was most appropriate for gilded tyrant form. Once Yi Shiwen would perfect both these techniques, a trivial attack wouldn't work on him. And even if he was tragically injured in a tyrannical battle, he would use Phoenix Regeneration Technique to regenerate any or all injuries. It could be estimated that the other 3 secret techniques were also rare masterpieces of Taoism. Now that they obtained great benefits, they would certainly become his rivals. However, Yi Shiwen did not want to think much about others' people's possessions. For now, the most important task was to master the Phoenix Regeneration Technique. Once perfected, even if he desired death, it would be difficult to die. Yi Mo saw this secret technique and could not help but jump up with excitement. This secret technique probably comes from the ancient race of mystical phoenix, passed down from generation to generation. But Phoenix race has vanished from the 10,000 Worlds community countless years ago. I must say, this technique should be a supreme secret of the ancient Phoenix clan, and only the direct blood descendants were allowed to practice it. How can it be here? Yi Shiwen frowned. This influence was far more terrifying and powerful than he initially imagined. It was hard to digest the fact that they actually possessed the secret technique of ancient Phoenix race that was said to have disappeared countless millenniums ago. He came to know from Yi Mo that dragon, phoenix and so-called other ancient beings had disappeared countless eras ago. It seemed like there occurred a terrible war in the 10,000 Worlds community, and led to their disappearance. One must note that all this happened long before the beginning of the era of Yi Mo's previous owner, the Great Devil King. There were dragon legends everywhere, but no one alive had actually seen one. This influence was ancient and huge, perhaps far beyond the imagination of Yi Mo as well. Not only could they get an access to the ancient phoenix technique, but might have also obtained secret techniques of other races which simply went against the heaven's will. He continued to read and found some explanations about phoenix regeneration, recorded in order to help increase the understanding of the practitioners. After studying the phoenix regeneration technique all day, he had to admit that its effects simply defied the heaven's will. When used in coordination with the Gilded Tyrant form, his battle efficiency and resilience would have no limits, rising dramatically all the way to an entirely new and profound level. But the secret techniques, now in the possession of the other three individuals, were not going to be ordinary either. Chapter 241. War with One True Union. Immortal Palace became the source of a sensation that spread throughout the Demon Island. For ancient Taoist skills had been divided among 4 tyrannical experts. However, the last one wasn't seized by Jiang Hua, but a rather little-known expert, the same guy who became famous few months ago when he crushed a law fragment. Yi Zaiwen had become famous when the law fragment incident occurred, but for the next few months, he remained low-key and everyone was busy in reshuffling and completely forgot about him. Moreover, later, the rumors spread that Deputy Chief of One True Union chased down and killed Yi Shiwen. However, no one thought that he would actually appear once again, and that too with such a blast. The emergence of Yi Shiwen went side by side with the annihilation of Jiang Hua and several other elites of One True Union. Yi Shiwen stunned everyone on the Demon Island and soared all the way, gaining a spot among the handful of super experts. So many experts saw how the elite members of One True Union were butchered by Yi Shiwen. Now there remained only one deputy chief in their alliance. The loss of a deputy chief was a matter of far more concern when compared to the loss of several elites. To put it bluntly, it could be said that the elites had grouped together on the Demon Island in various alliances only to seek greater benefits in a relatively safer way. The loss of few elites shouldn't matter much to them because it was not like they shared some kind of bond. However, the loss of Deputy Chief was a bigger issue because it put a big question mark on the reputation of the alliance and affected everyone associated with it. Everyone was waiting to see what kind of response would come from One True Union. And One True Union did not really let them down. They spread the news that within the remaining time on the Demon Island, they would continue to look for Yi Shiwen and kill him once found. The informants would be rewarded with 10 Ling Dawn, and if someone managed to kill Yi Shiwen, then they would be awarded the vacant position of Deputy Chief of One True Union. This was like the calm before a storm. One could see that this war was going to last for a long time. Many people guessed that this should continue until the arrival of the Demon Island's opening time. When One True Union issued the Search and Destroy command, a lot of experts began to help them in the search. At this time, Yi Shiwen was in a cave and practicing phoenix regeneration technique. He was unceasingly circulating Zhenyuan throughout his body, and following the process as recorded in that page. Lingqi was being constantly injected in his brain, and helping him in slowly grasping all the secrets of phoenix regeneration technique inside the mysterious space. He was not at all bothered about what all things happened on the island during his absence. He was just one man and it was not all difficult for him to hide from the pursuers on such a vast island, not to mention his restraining breath technique was active all the time. So experts of 5th or even 6th stage weren't able to sense his presence. So no matter how much they search, Yi Shiwen was not afraid. After all, the Demon Island was too big, and so long as he ran a little farther towards the depths, it would be impossible to find him. Right now he was very confident. Days passed and a month later, Yi Shiwen finally completely grasped the phoenix regeneration technique. Moreover, he was also getting stronger and stronger all the while. Now he was much stronger than he used to be before he started the practice. Now even if he was split in half, he would be able to regenerate and reorganize the cut-off parts of his body. This was the mind-blowing fact about this technique, because it was actually impossible even for the demon race to regenerate after being cut into 2 halves. However, such a magical ability was inherent to Phoenix race. After perfecting this divine technique, his close combat efficiency progressed by leaps and bounds. He could now compete with the experts of Truth 8th stage, and experts of Truth 7th stage could not even dream of putting even a single scratch on him. Yi Shiwen was now confident to deal with much higher-level opponents with ease. And it was not like he didn't know what was happening on the island while he was busy practicing this technique. Wu Xiaochuan was constantly collecting news and transmitting important information to Yi Shiwen. They had started a full-fledged search and destroy operation against him, but he simply did not care. In fact, this in itself was an indication of the damage done to their own practical significance, and was no different than strangulation of their beliefs at the hands of Yi Shiwen. But the significance of beliefs was one matter, and the possession of strength was another matter. At present, One True Union, or its second deputy chief, did not scare Yi Shiwen. He was only concerned to know about their mysterious leader. Yi Shiwen was guessing that he was certainly a powerhouse of Truth 8th stage or probably 9th stage. Otherwise, it would have been impossible to tame a psycho like Jiang Hua. And experts like that possess unmatched arrogance and are never satisfied. They don't stop until they have completely subdued any or all possible rivals around them. Else they get rid of the obstacles permanently. As long as he didn't bump into this mysterious chief, he was not afraid of the rest of the alliance. Now, with the help of Phoenix regeneration technique, even the experts of Truth 8th stage wouldn't be able to kill him. So what was there to be afraid of? So what if they were going to continue the search and destroy operation for the rest of the year? Phoenix regeneration not only helped in fast regeneration of injuries, but also increased the production speed of Zhen Yuan within the body. Hence, unless he was fighting with an expert of half-step legendary realm or legendary realm, it would be impossible to exhaust him to death. And now that the enemy had made its move, he would not just sit passively and wait for the enemy to find him. He got the information that One True Union had sent its strongest members to find him. And considering that no one had seen their leader, perhaps only the second deputy chief was guarding their encampment. One must know that the two deputy chiefs of One True Union were strong enough to place this alliance in the ranks of 4 strongest alliances. Although the deaths of Jiang Hua and the elite members was not enough to cause severe losses to One True Union, but could not be ignored either. After all, Jiang Hua's strength used to be only slightly inferior to other super experts. And since their chief had almost never been seen before, it could be said that the other deputy chief was very powerful. Perhaps his strength was comparable to Warhawk and the others. Yi Shiwen did not know, and neither did he want to waste time thinking about all that. According to the information he got from Wu Xiaochuan, the main forces of One True Union were not present in their encampment. Only the deputy chief was present to guard it along with the average members, indicating that now was the best time to attack their encampment. And most importantly, there were a variety of reasons that urged him to plan a trip to the encampment of One True Union. There was an irrevocable hatred between him and One True Union, reaching the point of kill of be killed. Yi Shiwen still hadn't forgotten the pledge he made to himself. Such being the case, he had nothing to say, and neither did he plan to wait. They are looking for me, so I think I should give them a chance and see if they can kill me? Yi Shiwen smirked and said in a strange manner. One True Union was one of the 4 major alliances, so it shouldn't be a problem to find its headquarters. Soon Yi Shiwen arrived near its encampment. One True Union's encampment was located in a true oasis, a big place, and all of the demon beasts in the surrounding area had already been beheaded by its members. At this time, a large number of experts had gone out to find the whereabouts of Yi Shiwen, but security here was still fairly tight. Yi Shiwen took out his long blade and walked towards the encampment. This was going to be the battlefield for a man versus an entire alliance, and perhaps only Yi Shiwen could do such a thing so calmly and fearlessly. Forget the entire force of an alliance. He wouldn't even think twice before clashing with that mysterious leader. Experts of Truth 5th and 6th stage were stationed at the fairly small gate. Yi Shiwen did not hide his presence, and allowed them to spread the warning about an intruder. They immediately pulled out their weapons and coldly looked at him. Yi Ziwen's image was already carved into their minds since the day search and destroy command was issued by their alliance. And as soon as they saw him coming, they immediately set out to cut him into pieces. Chapter 242. Tramples the Wan True Union. Spurki, Swordki, Bladiki, a variety of martial arts were swept towards Yi Shiwen. They noticed that Yi Shiwen did not budge in the face of the so many attacks, and themselves rushed forward to kill him. Yi Shiwen waved his long blade, and shot a fluctuating Bladiki so massive that it instantly crushed all the incoming attacks in one fell swoop. Puff! 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 Blood spattered everywhere, and all of the guards were instantly chopped into pieces. They were never a match of Yi Shiwen, and simply overestimated themselves thinking they could take him on. Although they were called geniuses and attacked in numbers, but still did not stand a chance against him. The noise suddenly alarmed many experts resting inside the encampment. Wan True Union was really worthy of being one of the 4 major alliances. Even if the main force was sent out on a mission to find Yi Shiwen, but a lot of experts had stayed back. And many of them were at the peak of truth 6th stage at such a young age, which was a clear declaration of their exceptional talent. Yi Shiwen, you are really something. You even dare to barge into our encampment? It seems you have become suicidal. An expert of truth 6th stage came out and said. There was a disdainful expression on his face. Poochie. Yi Shiwen flicked his finger, and shot a laser-like concentrated energy that instantly pierced into that expert's body and tore him apart from the inside. At this time, several experts simultaneously attacked him. Die. An expert waved his spear and released an enormous spurki that rushed towards Yi Shiwen, and it seemed as if it was going to puncture the world itself. Yi Shiwen instantly shot an endless stream of blade light from his long blade. This mass of brilliant energy as if looked like a section cut off from the Milky Way, and descended in this world. It instantly routed the spurki attack. Boom! A loud explosion occurred and the blade light swept towards that expert, and his body was split in half. He did not even get a chance to react and was instantly killed. Clang! 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 Various types of martial arts and weapons attacks were swept towards him. It seemed as if Yi Shiwen was standing in front of a huge wave of martial attacks, coming layer after layer. Although these members of Wan True Union were not good in coordinating their attacks, but their inherent talent and power were more than enough to compensate for the lack of teamwork. Yi Shiwen's facial expression was callous, but just by looking at him, one could see that he did not consider them as equals. Rather, he was chopping them like vegetables. The peerless geniuses of the 10 countries of Southeast region had become time pass, nothing more than a warm-up for Yi Shiwen. He used Celestial Step and marched forward without stagnation, and suddenly shot a tyrannical blade light towards the team of experts. Shwa! 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 The blade light rendered all of the incoming attacks useless, then took advantage of the opportunity to attack the experts. Puff! 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 Some experts were blasted away in the sky, while some were cut in half. The ones who managed to dodge the attack were personally chopped into pieces by Yi Shiwen. Wan True Union had placed several scouts in the nearby areas to keep a lookout for spies from other major alliances. It was needless to say that these scouts were extremely powerful, much stronger than the experts guarding the encampment. However, even those scouts had been completely wiped out by Yi Shiwen before he arrived here. They did not even get a chance to react or alert their comrades. Everyone present on the scene felt chills down their spines. When Yi Shiwen disappeared for almost a month, then no one knew where he went. A lot of people said that he was afraid of Wan True Union and ran away like a scaredy cat. Whereas a lot of people thought that Yi Shiwen was certainly tyrannical, but how could he possibly fight against an entire alliance? When they could not find him, they began to clamor that Yi Shiwen was a timid guy, a coward who was afraid to come out and face them. This was a tactic to provoke Yi Shiwen and compel him to come out, but a month passed and he didn't appear. But now that he finally appeared, he made an appearance like a terrifying storm. Yi Shiwen came alone and single-handedly killed so many members of Wan True Union. And this was just the beginning. This was like a big slap to those who called him coward. One man versus an alliance. No one would dare to do such a thing. Although most experts were not present in the encampment, but the remaining experts were still enough to make Wan True Union a tyrannical force. The deputy chief was a tyrannical expert, and he had personally taken command of Wan True Union in the absence of their leader. But even his presence was not enough to deter Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen was extremely arrogant, and no one really knew the extent of his strength. Yi Shiwen kicked the main gate and shattered it into pieces, then strode all the way towards the central station when he suddenly sensed a powerful expert coming towards him. Yi Shiwen, I admire you for your courage. But this is a dead end for you. A loud voice like a sonic boom resounded, and an expert of Truth 7th stage, who was standing far away from Yi Shiwen, suddenly shot towards him like a bullet while bringing an endless amount of Lingqi along with him. He congealed a huge hand made up of Lingqi and pounded it on Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen just casually waved his long blade, and shot an inexhaustible blade light that instantly obscured the entire area, and crashed into that huge hand of Lingqi. Poof! Yi Zaiwen's blade light effortlessly annihilated that huge hand of Lingqi and advanced towards the expert. This expert of Truth 7th stage was supposed to be the secret weapon of One True Union, and was only slightly weaker than the two deputy chiefs. Other elite members of the alliance who went out to find Yi Shiwen were relieved that an expert like him was there to guard their encampment. His confidence was understandable, but he never thought that Yi Shiwen would actually be so tyrannical. His huge hand of Lingqi was instantly routed by Yi Zaiwen's blade light, and it advanced toward him. It seemed as if the Big Bang itself had escaped from the river of time, and congealed in front of him. Poochie! He was instantly chopped into two halves. Yi Shiwen, you really want to die so badly, huh? There came a loud shout and echoed in the surroundings. I'll make sure to fulfill your wish. A blazing red figure suddenly appeared out of nowhere, and stared at Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen saw that this expert was quite young, had a fiery red hair, was tall and had a strong build. Yi Shiwen immediately figured that this guy was none other than the deputy chief of One True Union named Xiao Wuchang. He was the second strongest member of this alliance, after the mysterious leader. There was a cold look on his face, but he did not say anything else and immediately fired a punch, releasing a blossoming burning flower of flames towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen sneered and used Azure Dragon Rises from the Abyss move of Coiling Dragon Palm to summon a black coiling dragon that immediately coiled around him. At this time, Yi Shiwen looked like a god of war with his tamed black dragon, and as soon as the flaming flower approached him, the black coiling dragon directly tore it apart with its claws. Boom! This resulted into such a vast explosion that it wreaked havoc in all directions, reaching all the way into the sky, and the whole encampment began to burn violently. Xiao Wuchang's complexion suddenly changed because he never imagined that Yi Shiwen would be so strong. Now he got serious all of a sudden as he clearly understood that he could no longer afford to underestimate Yi Shiwen. The flames reached all the way to the nearby pond and instantly vaporized it, forming a thick layer of mist and smoke screen, making it difficult for the spectators to see clearly. Xiao Wuchang was about to attack once more, but heard an extremely sharp piercing sound, and suddenly saw a horrifying Bladiki coming towards him at an incredible speed. He quickly retreated several dozen feet and somehow managed to dodge it, but immediately saw that Yi Shiwen, grasping a long blade, had already arrived in front of him. At this time, he naturally did not dare to block Yi Zaiwen's blade, and repeatedly blasted waves of fire springing towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen instantly waved his long blade, and released innumerable blade shadows. He displayed Missing Moon Beheader, a Xiantian level martial technique, but he had already taken it to a whole another level, surpassing even the creator of this technique. Although the name was still the same and displayed picture was also the same, but Yi Shiwen had already revised it numerous times, transforming countless times to find the best suitable compatibility with the endless amount of Lingqi present in the air, since he could now manipulate Lingqi after stepping into Truth Realm. And with the integration of Lingqi into the basic concept of this technique, its overall might reached a whole another level. Now, even Truth level experts would find it difficult to block it. Puff! 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 Yi Zaiwen's Bladiki cut through the waves of fire and extinguished the flames thoroughly. The blade shadows were dancing around Yi Shiwen, and formed a protective layer, so that the blazing fire was no longer able to approach his body. I will send you on the journey to hell, but before that, I will cut off your head and keep it as a trophy. Xiao Wuchang said with a deadpan look on his face. Now that he was aware of Yi Zaiwen's strength, he became much more determined to kill him. Jiang Hua's death indeed made him angry, but he did not mind too much. After all, Jiang Hua was powerful, but there was still some gap between his strength and the strength of experts at the pinnacle of Truth's 7th stage. He used to think that Yi Zaiwen's strength was enough to deal with the average experts of Truth's 7th stage, but today he discovered the tragic error in his own assumption. Yi Shiwen was far stronger than he imagined. Xiao Wuchang knew that he must go all out and gathered all his power to congeal a giant fire dragon, and it suddenly sprang towards Yi Shiwen. Chapter 243, Source of Yellow River. Yi Shiwen, you are dead. You are so dead. Xiao Wuchang sneered again and again as his fire dragon's burning flames instantly enveloped Yi Shiwen. Xiao! 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 Suddenly, endless divinities emerged from Yi Zaiwen's body and completely wrapped him up. His body turned golden yellow, making him appear just like a golden god of war. There was no way that a fire dragon could burn his gilded tyrant body. Moreover, by using Phoenix regeneration, a damage of this level, if occurred, could be restored in an instant. Of course, the Phoenix regeneration was not universal and consumed lots of Zhen Yuan, or even consumed life essence to regenerate severe injuries. But Xiao Wuchang's attack was not potent enough to force Yi Shiwen to use Phoenix regeneration. The moment divinities burst out of Yi Zaiwen's body, it seemed as if a god descended on the earth. The fire dragon was unable to burn his body, but was directly annihilated instead. Yi Shiwen sneered and used the celestial step to suddenly appear in front of Xiao Wuchang. Boom! Yi Shiwen was so fast that Xiao Wuchang did not get enough time to dodge. Yi Shiwen rotated once and pounded a kick on his chest. Bang! Xiao Wuchang felt as if a mountain landed on his chest. He was sent flying and the blood sprayed out of his body and as if stained the blue sky. His body fell upside down to the ground and rolled few times before stopping. Yi Shiwen, you have thoroughly enraged me. I will burn you to ashes. Xiao Wuchang suddenly got angry. In his hands appeared a whip of fire, and he swept it towards Yi Shiwen. The blazing whip burned all things in its path, and even the air seemed to be burning in its flames. This attack was so fearsome that everything in the surroundings turned to ashes. Yi Zaiwen's stature shot forward like an arrow. His hands transformed into dragon claws, flashing endlessly with divine glory and directly grabbed the whip. Boom! Both of them severely collided in the midair, and suddenly, the air as if exploded under the pressure, setting off shock waves in all directions. The terrible shock wave crushed everything in its path. Even the towering ancient trees in the surrounding area were completely disintegrated. Today no one can save you from my wrath. Xiao Wuchang coldly stared at Yi Shiwen. You are free to try, that is if you think you have the skill. Yi Shiwen smirked and shot an inexhaustible bladiki that cut through the hot waves of fire. Boom, boom, boom. Both experts were going all out, and with each collision, Yi Zaiwen's imposing aura would increase bit a bit. This was an invincible imposing aura, when considering the general trend where most experts would find their imposing aura and battle efficiency decreasing in a protracted fight. They not only faced a decrease in physical strength, but also the weakening of their mental state. The so-called overbearing characters were not used to losing in a fight, and always enjoyed being on the winning side. But this general trend crashed down whenever Yi Shiwen came into the picture. Because irrespective of whether he was losing or winning, Yi Zaiwen's battle efficiency would always continue to rise dramatically. Yi Shiwen bravely rushed forward without showing any hesitation or restriction of any kind. Bang! Xiao Wuchang was once again sent flying for several dozen meters before finally dropping to the ground. Although his whole body was covered in flames, but he was still not a match of Yi Shiwen. His bones were shattered and his chest had caved in. The broken ribs directly punctured his heart, and he spat out blood. This was a battle of life and death, and Xiao Wuchang ended up on the losing side. He had an impressive start but was soon tragically suppressed by Yi Shiwen. This battle would act like a spark to ignite a rumor about the rise of a truly intrepid expert on the Demon Island. Xiao Wuchang was a prestigious expert, but was literally crushed like an ant. Yi Shiwen gradually stepped towards Xiao Wuchang, arrived near his body, then lifted his foot and stamped on his chest. Bang! Xiao Wuchang's chest region along with his heart and other internal organs were thoroughly crushed and turned into minced meat. The experts, who were observing this battle from afar, were stunned. Xiao Wuchang was dead and the whole Wanchu Union was trampled. All this mess caused by just one man. Even the mysterious leader of Wanchu Union would never have thought that this could happen to his alliance. The whole Demon Island was going to fall into chaos. After killing Xiao Wuchang, Yi Shiwen did not stay and turned around to leave, leaving the encampment in fire and ashes. Next day, the whole island was in an uproar when they heard the rumors about how Yi Shiwen single-handedly routed the Wanchu Union, and their encampment was now in ruins. Many people did not pay much attention to Yi Shiwen, but now they had to admit that he was extremely astonishing. Single-handedly crushing an entire alliance was no joke. In fact, no one else on the Demon Island had achieved such a feat. There were several lone experts who were usually at a disadvantage while dealing with the experts affiliated to some alliance. But an alliance facing heavy losses at the hands of a lone expert was simply unheard of. The loss of 2 deputy chiefs was certainly a great loss for an alliance, especially when only one man responsible for killing both. Many experts wanted to join the Wanchu Union, but now they chose to give up the idea. After all, they wanted to join this alliance for stability, not for getting massacred by an infamous tyrannical expert. From the past incidents, it was clear to everyone that Yi Shiwen was not done yet, and would surely come back again. And now that the 2 deputy chiefs were out of the picture, Wanchu Union was drowned in chaos, and the return of the mysterious leader would make it fall into deeper turmoil. This incident also acted as a warning for other alliances. Now all of the experts knew that they must not provoke Yi Shiwen at any cost, otherwise, they might end up risking not only their own lives but the fate of their alliance as well. Yi Shiwen proved a simple point to everyone on the Demon Island, that their so-called alliances and tyrannical leaders could not save them from his wrath if they messed with him. After all, even a major alliance was stripped naked by him. The Wanchu Union faced heavy losses, but it was still not completely out of business. It still had a lot of experts who could act as its backbone. After wreaking havoc as he initially planned, Yi Shiwen went towards the depths of the Demon Island. I cannot come with you because today I am going to look at the source of this yellow river. Why don't you join me? Mu Ling said. In the last 2 months, his cultivation level rose up to the peak of truth 7th stage. It seemed like he continued to cultivate in the Yellow River by unceasingly killing the ghost soldiers for the entire 2 months period. The non-stop digestion and absorption helped in an extremely quick progression of his cultivation. This time, when he saw Yi Shiwen, he thought of him as a trusted companion. Yi Shiwen also thought that since he did not have any other major objective right now, he might as well accompany Mu Ling. Besides, he was also very curious about the source of this Yellow River. The 2 men went along the trail of the river all the way towards the huge ominous mountain. Although there was no trace of ghost soldiers or the Yellow River right now, but Mu Ling was very sensitive to the aura of the dead and would not go astray. At nightfall, they finally reached the source of the Yellow River. Yi Ziwen's gaze fell upon an open space with numerous mounds of earth neatly arranged on the ground. Yi Shiwen easily recognized that this piece of land was home to at least hundreds of thousands of graves, and none of these graves were marked with gravestoneses if buried in a hurry. Suddenly, a cold feeling arose in his heart. It was too strange for such a vast cemetery to exist on this island. And right after he entered the range of the cemetery, he felt his body stagnating right away. It seemed as if his strength was being completely suppressed. Even though he could move, but right now, he was nothing more than an average human being. Yi Shiwen immediately turned towards Mu Ling, and found him in a similar state. Chapter 244 Tomb Slave. Yi Shiwen, I think this place is really strange. Mu Ling frowned and said. Encountering a mass grave in a place like this was unusual. It was easy to guess that something horrible must have happened to these people since this entire graveyard was filled with resentments and inchi. There were hundreds of thousands of graves without tombstones and indicated the existence of an ancient battlefield. In fact, this scale was way too large for an ordinary battlefield. And when considering the fact that it was located on the Demon Island, which was suspected to be the residence of a tyrannical influence from ancient times, Yi Shiwen was disinclined to believe that this was an ordinary cemetery. Not to mention, the trace of Yellow River also vanished here. indicating that this cemetery was actually located at the terminus of the Yellow River, and was possibly its source. Yi Shiwen suddenly felt a chill running down his spine. I think this is an ancient battlefield, Yi Shiwen said. I guess you are right, Mu Ling said. Otherwise, how can so many people die and leave behind so much resentment? The two men did not know when the clouds were quietly torn open, and the starlight from countless stars shone brightly on the gravises, if covering the entire cemetery with a pure white cloth. Yi Shiwen took 2 steps forward and felt like he should not stay here for too long, and quickly turned back to leave. Yi Shiwen just stepped near a grave, and suddenly, there erupted an imposing aura from the grave and pounced upon him in the form of a hollow shadow. Yi Shiwen was firmly nailed to the ground by that ghastly aura, and he actually saw a tall figure clad in armor. The ghostly figure looked strong, and was giving off the aura of a worthy opponent that possessed a brave heart. Yi Shiwen felt his own spirit being locked down, and this made him unable to think properly, but at this time, the golden divinity instantly burst out of his body and freed his mind and soul. Yi Shiwen quickly got up and jumped to the side. But at this time, both Yi Shiwen and Mu Ling saw a kind of strange yellow liquid emerging from the ground. They could sense the aura associated with it, and realized that it was flowing out of the hell. Their eyes caught a strange scene where in the dim light of the starry night, the yellow liquid slowly began to overflow from the graves, and the endless streams joined together to create the Yellow River that galloped towards the horizon, making its way through the initial trace of Yellow River. The Yellow River also packed the lingering resentments and Inchi along with it as it flowed away from the cemetery, and these resentments slowly took the forms of ghost soldiers. The ghost soldiers roared and marched in the river as if living their lives once again. Yi Shiwen could not help but feel somewhat uncomfortable in the face of the terrifying auras of Inchi and Deadki that shot up to the sky. The Inchi and Deadki were extremely terrible, moreover they intertwined in the sky and began a tangled warfare. This swept off dreadful aura in all directions as if to subjugate anyone in its path. Perhaps it could sweep away the entire Zhenwuji if this island's space was not sealed. Suddenly, Yi Shiwen sensed something and turned his head to see a trembling old man coming out from the woods. Both Yi Shiwen and Mu Ling were immediately startled. After all, they had already lost their battle efficiencies in this cemetery, and the sudden emergence of this uncanny old man could be a sign of danger. Even in his past life, Yi Shiwen would not call such a shady old man harmless, not to mention, in this world, one simply could not judge a person by their appearance. Well, 50 years have passed. The old man sighed loudly and slowly arrived in front of the two men. He walked through the Yellow River, but was strangely not at all affected. This old man was giving them goosebumps. After all, he just crossed the Yellow River like it was nothing. He did not even wrap his feet with Zhenyuan like Mu Ling, for preventing the corrosion. This old man was giving off an immeasurably deep aura, and simply disregarded Deadki and yellow water, while walking towards Yi Shiwen and Mu Ling. In fact, even the ghost soldiers directly made way, and did not dare to approach him. Who are you? Yi Shiwen asked. You ask my name? It's been too long, already forgotten. You can call me Tomb Slave. The old man said slowly. Tomb Slave. Another 50 years have passed, I presume. Just hope that this time, someone can do it. The Tomb Slave said with a sigh. Heaven can be unfair sometimes. Yi Shiwen was confused, but he felt that this was somehow related to the bell that rang only once in 50 years. The old man looked at Yi Shiwen and said, I want to ask you, can you do a task for me? Please tell. Yi Shiwen said respectfully, but felt somewhat weird. This old man's cultivation was simply unfathomable, but wanted him to do something for him? Was there really a task that he could not accomplish? Due to some special reasons, I cannot leave this place and want you two to do a task for me. Naturally, you two will receive great rewards. The Tomb Slave said in a monotonous manner. May I know what this task is all about? Yi Shiwen asked. See that holy mountain over there? There is a sacred immortal palace named Peak Palace above that mountain, and there is a seal affixed at its peak. If you can bring over that seal to me, then you will receive my legacy. The old man said. Legacy? Yi Shiwen did not know what the old man meant by that, but this Tomb Slave's heritage was bound to be incredible. It is good that you know Phoenix regeneration technique. After a moment of silence, the old man said again and shocked Yi Shiwen all of a sudden. The old man actually saw through Yi Shiwen and his secrets. The cultivation level of this old man was simply beyond the imagination of this mortal world. However, Yi Shiwen somewhat hesitated to take up this mission because according to what the tomb slave said, this immortal palace was apparently located atop that ominous mountain from where he had heard terrifying shrieks when he first stepped on this island. What if this so-called seal was placed to imprison those terrifying creatures? If those things were allowed to go out of this island, then it would be a huge disaster for Wuxia. The old man looked at Yi Shiwen, and as if understood what he was thinking, but did not get mad, rather commendably smiled at him and said, "Rest assured, kid. It is true that I want to fulfill my tens of thousands of years old wish of getting that seal, but you do not need to worry because that seal is not placed to bind them. I am not cruel enough to endanger the fate of the entire world for the sake of selfish desires. Indeed, it's true that the heaven has played tricks with me, but everything occurs for some reason," the old man said, and Yi Shiwen sensed that there was endless sadness in his voice. "Such being the case, I'm willing to do this task," Yi Shiwen said, "but the point is that I may not be able to deal with those creatures." Mu Ling nodded as he was also aware of the risk involved in this mission since the creatures on that ominous mountain were really too fearful, not to mention, even the experts of legendary realm might not be able to deal with them. "Since I chose you two, I will naturally not send you to your deaths. Soon, there comes a short span of time that appears once in a millennium when all of the souls on that holy mountain will be in their most weakened state. Then you will have the opportunity to get that seal. Remember, you will have only 1 hour's time to retrieve that seal. If you are unable to get out of there in time then..." The tomb slave did not say further, but Yi Shiwen knew what he meant. "It's something dangerous, so it is up to you whether you want to go or not," the tomb slave said. Yi Ziwen's brain began to think crazily. He had a powerful technique like phoenix regeneration, and if he succeeded then he would receive some formidable reward from the old man. And it should not be inferior to phoenix regeneration, so the temptation was naturally immense. But the danger involved was also immense. Needless to say, the old man did not hide the risk involved in this mission, but there was still a chance of success. After all, it was an opportunity that appeared only once in a millennium. Yi Shiwen did not feel any malice from this old man. At this time, Mu Ling asked, "Why doesn't the senior go himself to retrieve the seal? It should be an easy task for you." "No, I cannot go." The old man shook his head and said, "I have made a pledge to defend this cemetery for eternity. As long as I am alive, I cannot leave this place, and perhaps not even after death." Yi Shiwen was shocked when he heard this. What could force an expert of such profound level to stay here as a gravekeeper? It's something that you can do, but whether you want to do it or not is something you have to decide. The old man said, "Otherwise, I don't mind waiting for another 50 years. Yi Shiwen immediately made a speculation. A bell rings once in every 50 years on the Demon Island to summon young geniuses. Are these two matters somehow related? And if this old man had continued to choose people each time the island opened for a new group of young geniuses, generation after generations, then how many people had already set foot on this island? Certainly, many of them must have accepted this task, but that seal had still not been retrieved by anyone. This explained that all those who tried to retrieve it were dead. Chapter 245. Weak mentality. After making this inference, Yi Shiwen could not help but feel horror in his heart. Super geniuses like Qi Fifan must have been summoned to this demon island, and countless peerless geniuses might have accepted this mission, but no one was successful. Moreover, just the mention of Peak Palace's name was enough to shock him. Last time he went to an immortal palace, he got a mighty technique like phoenix regeneration that simply defied the heavens. Each time he went to such places, he felt as if he was venturing into a prehistoric era, making him feel like he was in a mythical age. He was getting similar vibes when he set foot on this island, and now, he was discovering weird places all over the island. When he was on the earth, although he was not a big man of mythology, but he was still quite familiar with this stuff. However, before those were all just myths and he did not need to find sense in any of them. But now the situation was different. Yi Shiwen knew that there were many formidable forces in this world. The Heavenly Sector, the Devil World, the Hell, the Dragon Clan, and recently he found out about the existence of Phoenix Clan, and so on. Yi Shiwen was quite surprised to hear familiar legends in this world, as they used to be in his past life. The similarities were enough to sometimes scare him, and now he found several clues regarding those myths on this island. I do not force you to do this task for me. Before leaving the island, you can come here to find me, the old man said and slowly walked towards the depths of the cemetery. Yi Shiwen looked this elderly figure slowly disappear. The rumor about how Yi Shiwen slaughtered the 2 deputy chiefs of One True Union set off a storm on the entire island and shook everyone. One True Union's mysterious leader finally made an appearance, and the members of the alliance began to clamor. Yi Shiwen is simply nothing. As long as our chief goes into action, he can kill him instantly by raising just one hand. To verify whether the rumor about the demise of the 2 deputy chiefs was true, an alliance dared to provoke the mysterious leader by attacking the One True Union's members in his absence. This alliance made the biggest mistake of thinking that there was actually no mysterious leader of One True Union. However, as a result of that, the mysterious leader personally went to the encampment of that alliance and killed each and every member. This worked to deter the entire Demon Island and remind everyone about the true status of One True Union. Eagle Union's chief Warhawk once commented that Wan Chengyao was an expert of truth 8th stage, moreover the most outstanding among the experts of the same level, and he was strong enough to kill any disciple on the Demon Island if he desired. In this case, both Yi Shiwen and merciless Wan Chengyao became the subject of gossip throughout the Demon Island. Many people were talking about the collision between these two and how fearful that duel would be. Wan Chengyao's sudden appearance was not contrary to everyone's expectations. In fact, now they were waiting for Yi Ziwen's death that would end this entire ruckus. However, how to kill Yi Shiwen? Even an idiot would know that finding Yi Shiwen on such a vast island was extremely difficult. When everyone thought that Wan Chengyao would soon give up, he finally made his move. On this island, all the forces related to Yi Shiwen shall be destroyed. Wan Chengyao's indifferent announcement spread throughout the Demon Island. That day, he led his forces to the encampment of Great Yu State's Tianfeng Union. There were more than 24 disciples in the encampment. Not all of them belonged to the Tianfeng Hall. Some belonged to relatively unknown sects of Great Yu State, who had also joined Tianfeng Union. But in the end, Tianfeng Union was not very strong. The powerhouses of various alliances also arrived there to see what would happen to the Tianfeng Union. My God, One True Union is really going to attack the Tianfeng Union. Even if a lot of powerhouses have been killed by Yi Shiwen, the One True Union is still very formidable. Is this the end of Tianfeng Union? Many experts were observing from afar and saw a man clad in a black robe, standing high in the air and coldly looking at Tianfeng Union's encampment. This One True Union really plans to destroy an entire alliance? What do they think of us weak alliances? Do they think we are like the meat on a chopping board? A disciple said. There was anger in his voice along with dissatisfaction. They were supposed to be peerless geniuses of the younger generation, and now they were going to be killed for no reason whatsoever. Rumors are that this is Wan Chengyao decision, and he is at Truth 8th stage. Although his cultivation is not extraordinary in the outside world where there are tens of thousands of experts at his level, but now on the Demon Island, who can be his match? The Tianfeng Union and Yi Shiwen are not at all related. Wan Chengyao is planning to destroy them just because they come from the same state as Yi Shiwen. Soon he will come for us because we are also the experts from the southeast region like Yi Shiwen. An expert said in a frustrated tone. His men are human beings and we are not. Why is he treating us like livestock? Now they truly felt that strength was the ultimate justice in this world. Just because Wan Chengyao was a tyrannical expert, he could do anything on a whim and others would have no choice but to suffer. In the end, he could do things that they could not do. Is he not scared that Tianfeng Hall will take revenge for this? Someone asked. Things that happen on the Demon Island cannot involve the outside world. This rule has been handed down since ancient times, otherwise, Why would Yi Shiwen dare to recklessly kill experts from various sects? And we should not forget that Wan Chengyao is actually a very ruthless man. Moreover, the strength of Wan Chengyao's sect is far above that of the Tianfeng Hall. Today Tianfeng Hall is going to face heavy losses. Do you think Yi Shiwen will appear? Certainly not. His strength is comparable to Truth's 7th stage. How can he be a match of Wan Chengyao, who is presently at the peak of Truth 8th peak? Moreover, Wan Chengyao is using this method to compel him to appear. Today, I'm going to destroy Tianfeng Union of Great Yu State. If Yi Shiwen does not appear, then as the days pass, more and more people, related to him, shall die. Wan Chengyao said in an overbearing manner, and his imposing aura spread out in all directions. The members of Tianfeng Union did not pretend not to see and immediately rushed out in abundance. Let's fight with them, they are going too far. Kill. The bloody carnage began and should be called one-sided slaughter. The disciples of Tianfeng Union did not get a chance to either resist or escape, and were thoroughly crushed by the Wan True Union. Only a few powerful members of Tianfeng Union, along with their leader, were able to escape with serious injuries. The Tianfeng Union simply did not get a chance to fight back, and its members were directly massacred. This time, Wan True Union finally managed to restore their prestige that was initially trampled by Yi Shiwen. Although someone else's blood had to flow for this, but the Wan True Union still got admiration for their might and ruthlessness. This was truly a sinister method of slaughtering people who were not at all personally related to Yi Shiwen. They are using a vicious method. Yi Shiwen sighed with emotion and said. Yi Shiwen received the news, and already after 3 days, he had been in the depths of the Demon Island and practicing Gilded Tyrant form. His upper body was fully covered with a golden protective layer, and once he would perfect the Gilded Tyrant form, his new battle efficiency would be enough to deal with an expert of Truth 8th stage, even without himself stepping into the Truth 7th stage. It seems you cannot reason with this mysterious leader. He is actually pushing everyone against you. Yi Mo's voice appeared in his mind. Wan Chengyao is very formidable. Yi Shiwen said because he truly was not a match of that guy. Wan Chengyao's threat was understandable. After all, Yi Shiwen destroyed his alliance's encampment, killed his men, and also killed his 2 deputy chiefs. His hate for Yi Shiwen was inevitable. Although this way of thinking was abnormal, but certainly not how a weak person would think. A weak person would try to find Area Sun behind Yi Shiwen's actions. But Wan Chengyao did not want to waste time on that. Yi Shiwen was already his target, and nothing would stop him from destroying his target. In Yi Shiwen's past life, some people would steadily make concessions while facing enemy provocations because they thought that just because the other side was being aggressive, there was no need for them to behave similarly. However, they never thought that just because they stepped back, their action worked towards encouraging the aggressor to continue using this method on others as well. Just because Yi Shiwen had come from that kind of environment, he understood how to deal with this man. Perhaps not all people would agree to Yi Shiwen's way of doing things. Because Wan Chengyao is too strong, so in the end, I am the one at fault for not being able to protect others. Yi Shiwen said, since it was a fact that all those people died because of him. You must not go out or you will simply be falling into his trap. You are not his match. Yi Mo said. This is exactly what he wants. He wants you to act rashly. Chapter 246. Approaching War. You must not go out or you will simply be falling into his trap. You are not his match. Yi Mo said. This is exactly what he wants. He wants you to act rashly. Wan Chengyao was much stronger than Jiang Hua and Xiao Wuchang. And he was much smarter as well. Yi Shiwen planned to stay low and appear only when he was strong enough to deal with the enemy. But now, Wan Chenyao's tactic was forcing Yi Shiwen to come out, and if he did, he might fall under the wind. Yi Shiwen was most disgusted from people like Wan Chengyao who used their own potential to oppress and manipulate others, and could go to any extent to achieve their goals. When Wan Chengyao noticed that Yi Shiwen was not coming out no matter how much he waited, he used this seemingly innocuous method to bully and kill unrelated people, and turn everyone against Yi Shiwen. Wan Chengyao had long sacrificed his moral values, and no longer valued human life. That was the reason why he could come up with such a vicious method. I know. Yi Shiwen nodded and said. And I'm more afraid that if he alone can do so much damage, what if someone else joined him in his plans? Then the whole situation will become even worse. For example, the 8th prince. Yi Ziwen's fears soon became reality. Only a month later, the 8th finally made his first appearance on the Demon Island. Moreover, using his identity as the 8th prince of Great Yu State, he was leading an alliance of young geniuses of the royal clan, and from Yunqing City. The Imperial Union announced a joint hunt with the Wanchu Union to capture Yi Shiwen. Moreover, Yi Shiwen heard a rumor that Hua Menghan and Chen Ruochen had fallen into the hands of the 8th prince. Yi Shiwen did not care much about the destruction of Tianfeng Union, but he cared about Hua Menghan and Chen Ruochen because they were his comrades. Not to mention, he was repeatedly helped by Hua Menghan. He must save them at any cost. Yi Shiwen still remained missing for another month. Wanchu Union and Imperial Union finally made their move, and openly declared that their next target would be Shuling sect. If Yi Shiwen did not appear, then they would start the raid 3 days later. The people who were familiar with the internal affairs of Great Yu State immediately understood that the 8th prince was using Wanchu Union to eradicate the younger generation of Shuling sect. Then he would be one step closer to his plan of dominating the Great Yu State. Everyone knew that Yiyuan School had not produced peerless geniuses after Qi Fifan. In fact, only 3 were summoned this time. And among them, only Yi Shiwen could be considered a threat to the 8th prince's plans. The younger generation of Tianfeng Hall had already been destroyed, leaving only a few who escaped with serious injuries. Yunqing City was always a supporter of the royal clan. Now one major force was out of the picture, and this meant that the power balance of Great Yu State was now in the hands of remaining 4 major forces. The remaining 2 sects standing in the way of the 8th prince were Yiyuan School and Shuling sect. He just needed to destroy the younger generation of these 2 sects to fulfill his goals. But even if people knew about this, there was no way to stop Wanchu Union and Imperial Union. After all, their leaders were tyrannical experts of Truth 8th stage. Facing one expert of Truth 8th stage was asking too much, and there were 2 of them looking to kill Yi Shiwen. The rumors were that after 3 days, they would not only crush Shuling Union, but also perform the public execution of Hua Menghan and Chen Ruochen. If this really happened and Yi Shiwen did not show up, then one could imagine the kind of reputation he would have in the future. Moreover, this might leave a permanent scar on Yi Ziwen's mind and hinder his further development. Even if he did not die, the lack of development potential would turn him into an average expert without courage and ambition. Afterward, he would be called a dedicated invincible expert that was wounded forever. The cold moonlight was spread over a mountain peak. A few months gone, I never thought that the 8th prince has reached the peak of Truth 8th stage, indeed fearful. Yi Shiwen was standing on the mountain peak, and looking into the distance. He once defeated the 8th prince, but in a same-level fight. If the battle did not take place in front of Yiyuan School, then the 8th prince would have never agreed to have a seal placed on his level. The 8th prince was indeed a formidable opponent, and it could be said that his strength was almost comparable to that of Wan Qingyao. Yi Shiwen did not have a shred of fear, only a bit of excitement before the war. Is this 8th prince very strong? Mu Ling's voice sounded from the side. Yi Shiwen was going to face 2 major alliances, and told Mu Ling, who immediately put down the practice to help his friend. Very strong. Yi Shiwen nodded. Mu Ling was surprised as he looked at Yi Shiwen. Although he did not know Yi Shiwen for a long time, but knew that he never talked irresponsibly. If Yi Shiwen said that the 8th prince was very strong, then he had to be very strong. If given the chance, I want to fight him. Mu Ling's face flashed with excitement. You won't get a chance because this time, I am going to kill him. Yi Shiwen said, and a trace of firm and resolute look appeared on his face. Last time, Yi Shiwen was unable to kill him, but he wouldn't be so lucky this time. It is really a pity. Mu Ling was aware of his own strength and knew that he would not lose to anyone on the same level, but both Wan Qingyao and 8th prince were one level above him. He really regretted that he was not at the Truth 8 stage, because he wanted to fight with those 2 tyrannical experts. But can you really beat them? Mu Ling asked. He knew that Yi Shiwen was strong, but he could not ignore the capability of those 2. Moreover, If Yi Shiwen was at Truth 8 stage, then the whole thing would have been a lot easier. But he was still at the peak of Truth 6 stage, and there was a difference of 2 levels between him and his enemies. I do not have another choice, Yi Shiwen said and spread out his hand. His whole body was instantly covered with a golden protective layer, making him look like a golden god of war. In this moment, even the moon and the stars lost their color in front of his shining golden body, as if he was the incarnation of the sun itself. He had perfected the gilded tyrant form. This whole month, Yi Shiwen naturally did not do anything else, but continued to kill demon beasts and absorb their divinities to strengthen the gilded tyrant form. The most important thing he did to complete the gilded tyrant form was to take a big risk of stealing the egg of Supreme Tyrannosaurus. He was chased for 5 days and nights by this monster of legendary realm, and was almost killed several times. He was also split in half and dismembered a few times, but fortunately, he had phoenix regeneration, otherwise, he would have died back then. But the risk was worth it, since after digesting the divinity contained in the egg, he finally perfected the gilded tyrant form. After perfecting the gilded tyrant form, now his battle efficiency was only slightly less than that of an expert of Truth 8 stage. At least now he would not need to retreat, though he could only expect a desperate fight. Your task is to pin down the experts of the 2 alliances. Leave Wan Qingyao and that 8th prince to me, Yi Shiwen said. As long as those 2 men do not interfere, even the experts of Shuling Union can take care of the other experts. I will prefer to lend you a hand, Mu Ling said, and was willing to remain at his friend's side no matter where the path would take them. No, Yi Shiwen shook his head. Now on the Demon Island, perhaps only I can kill them both. If I cannot do it, then no one can. Yi Shiwen was so confident because he could feel the sudden power surge within his body after perfecting the gilded tyrant form. He did not suspect Mu Ling's ability. If he was an expert of Truth 8th stage, then he would not be inferior to them. Now we must prepare for the upcoming war, Yi Shiwen said. He wanted to cultivate Zhen Yuan for the next 3 days to restore his strength. The Supreme Tyrannosaurus was too fearful and injured him so badly and so many times that his vitality was hurt in the process. Even with Phoenix regeneration, it would take time to regenerate his lost vitality. Although his battle efficiency would not suffer with the loss of vitality, but his endurance would suffer considerably. Thankfully, 3 days were enough to cultivate vitality with the help of Phoenix regeneration. 3 days passed quickly, and the raid finally began on the Shuling Union. Chapter 247 Battle with the 2 Tyrants. In the early morning, the Imperial Union and the Wan True Union arrived at the encampment of Shuling Union to begin the punitive expedition. In addition, almost 1,000 other disciples also came to observe the battle. The 8th prince was standing in midair. Clad in a royal robe, he looked like an absolute tyrant who seemed all prepared to dominate the entire world. Right now, he was looking indifferently towards the members of Shuling Union. In his opinion, these people were actually the rebels, and he must either tame them or eradicate them. Wan Qingyao was standing at his side, and looked even more vicious, as if he was not looking at humans but ants. Yi Shiwen, come out to die, the 8th prince coldly said and glanced towards the crowd of experts that had come to observe, as if to recognize Yi Ziwen's face. At this time Wan Qingyao said, "Let's begin. If he doesn't want to come out, we will compel him to come out. Attack!" The 8th prince issued the command, and disciples of the 2 alliances rushed towards the disciples of Shuling Union to exterminate them. The disciples of Imperial Union mostly consisted of Imperial guards who were trained to eradicate any and all obstacles from the path of the 8th prince. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, there came noise of intermittent fearful explosions, and those disciples who crashed in the encampment found themselves trapped inside a scarlet-colored genere. They were now firmly surrounded from all sides. Some disciples screamed pitifully, and their bodies disintegrated on the spot. The spilled blood was directly absorbed by the array, and took the shape of an evil blood god. It curled up the corners of its mouth to reveal an evil grin, and a blood-red spear appeared in its hand. The evil blood god threw the spear that branched out into numerous spears, and instantly nailed several disciples to the ground. Not good, we fell into their trap. A disciple shouted in panic. At this time, the 8th prince's complexion slightly changed as he said, "Damn, this is Shuling Union's trap." Muyuran. The 8th prince clenched his teeth. Did you think that the Shuling Union will just sit back and do nothing? A strange voice sounded from the direction of Shuling Union's encampment, and a blood-red figure flew out of there. I will terminate your followers. Your dream of world domination can go to hell. The young man in a blood-red robe with somewhat pale complexion said in a cold voice as he viciously stared at the enemy. It was Muyuran, the super geniuses from the younger generation of Shuling sect. You are courting death, you must blame Yi Shiwen for this. You are suffering because he did not show up. The 8th prince gritted his teeth and shouted, You think you can deceive me? Muyuran said disdainfully, This low-level trick doesn't fool me. Give up on your whole brainwash plan, and don't even bother acting friendly. No need to talk nonsense with him. I will break this array right away. Wan Qingyao could not see his men getting killed in front of his eyes. I am already here. Are you blind or something, cannot see me? A cold voice resounded throughout the sky and a huge blade light suddenly swept towards Wan Qingyao. Wan Qingyao sneered and his hands spread out to form a layer of divine light that instantly annihilated the blade light. Yi Shiwen, you finally came to meet your death? The 8th prince said, and a crazed look appeared in his eyes. I give him to you. Wan Qingyao looked at the 8th prince and said, then advanced toward the Shuling array. Boom! Yi Shiwen shot his palm. A giant golden dragon flew towards Wan Qingyao and blocked his path. Did I say you can go? Yi Shiwen indifferently said. At this time, Mu Ling vanished from the side of Yi Shiwen and appeared in front of Yunqing City's top genius named Jian Wuchen. You showed up today and made the biggest mistake of your life. I'll never let you run away again. The 8th prince ferociously said. You are quite the tactician, aren't you? Yi Shiwen smirked and said. You used me as a reason to eradicate your competitors. That's really a good plan. So long as I can kill you, I don't mind going to any limits. The 8th prince's face revealed an evil smile. Kill me? You really do like to joke around, don't you? Did you forget how I nailed you to the ground like a dead dog? If that old guy hadn't come to save your sorry ass, I would have tortured you to death. Well, I'd like to see who is going to save you today. Yi Shiwen smiled, but each and every word that came out of his mouth hit the bullseye. Your elder sealed my power, otherwise, I would have defeated you easily. But today, I will use my full power to kill you. The 8th prince's heart was instantly filled with monstrous rage and ferocity. He was confident because today he could display his full power, and after obtaining the heritage of 4 sacred beasts sect, his power and skill had progressed by leaps and bounds. He completely forgot the fact that in the last duel, Yi Shiwen used to at the peak of truth 4th stage, and even after his own level was sealed, he was still at small truth level. I wanted the 8th prince to deal with you, but since you are so eager to die, I will first kill you. Wan Qingyao coldly glared at the man who slaughtered his 2 deputy chiefs. An invincible imposing aura burst out of his body as if he was the true supreme existence in this world. The 8th prince's imposing aura also broke out. He was truly worthy of his reputation. And from the wretched expression on his face, one could see that he would resort to all means as long as they served his purpose. Not to mention, he planned to team up with Wan Qingyao to slaughter Yi Shiwen. If you think you can stop us and allow Shuling guys to kill our men, you're too naive. I can radically kill you with a flick of my hand. Wan Qingyao sneered. Then why don't you try? Yi Shiwen was not in a hurry, because this was the time for the enemy to be anxious. With passing time, their men were getting slaughtered inside the Shuling array. The spectators were shocked because they clearly saw that Yi Shiwen had little to no chance of winning. Battling 2 experts of Truth 8th peak simultaneously was simply insane. Is he insane? How does he plan to fight those 2? I think he is trying to stall for time so that the large array of Shuling Union can sweep clean the disciples of the 2 major alliances. Everyone was aware of the fearfulness of those 2 tyrants, and one would need boundless courage and willpower to face both of them simultaneously. I don't think so. At this time, Warhawk crossed his hands behind the back and solemnly said, I sense heavy murderous aura from Yi Shiwen. He actually plans to kill them. The surrounding disciples were left stunned when they heard this. According to them, fighting even one was insane, but according to Warhawk, Yi Shiwen was all set to kill both? Was such a thing really possible? These two tyrants were existences of truth. 8th peak. The news about Yi Ziwen's battle with those two was enough to attract this island's celebrities like Warhawk, Ji Moon and Wang Purple to come here to watch the battle. Wan Qingyao waved his blade, and a dazzling long blade light went across the sky towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen did not reveal any expression on his face, just instantly covered his whole body with a layer of Zhen Yuan and golden divinity. Then, the long blade danced in his hand, and shot a fluctuating blade light to welcome the incoming attack. Zizi. Zizi. Boom. Two blade lights collided and mutually devoured each other, setting off endless blast waves in all directions. The surrounding forest was directly wiped out by the aftermath of this blast. A grim smile appeared on the 8th prince's face as he took out his spear and shot terrifying spear shadows towards Yi Shiwen. Shua. Yi Shiwen waved his long blade horizontally and blocked this peerless spear attack. The battle has started. Some people exclaimed. Yi Shiwen was showing no signs of falling under the wind, even if he was facing attacks from the two tyrant experts. This made people feel as if their heads would explode with bafflement. What the hell was going on? However, there were many people who thought that Yi Shiwen should not fall under the wind from the beginning. After all, if that happened, then there was no point in coming to observe this battle. Although people thought that Yi Shiwen was audacious, but no one thought of him as an idiot. Right when the 8th prince's spear attack was blocked by Yi Shiwen, Wan Qingyao instantly released a much larger blade light than before. As Yi Shiwen expected, these two tyrants seemed to be in a hurry and wanted to finish this fight as quickly as possible. After all, if their elite men were exterminated inside the Shuling array, then what would happen to their aggressive dominance? The two tyrants would end up being loners on this island. Boom. After a terrifying collision, both sides continually withdrew several steps. Yi Ziwen's gilded tyrant body was vibrating right now. Its defense was truly tyrannical, but Yi Ziwen's level was not enough to simultaneously deal with two experts from 2 levels above. In fact, the two tyrants were shocked to no limit, especially the 8th prince. His eyes were full of disbelief because he never expected that Yi Shiwen would display such a progress. He got the heritage of 4 sacred beasts and managed to reach the peak of truth 8th stage so quickly, but what kind of heritage Yi Shiwen obtained to progress so fast, and that too at such a young age? It was obvious that Yi Shiwen really defeated him when it came to cultivation progress speed. Die. Thinking of this, an endless killing intention spread in the 8th prince's bloodshot eyes. Chapter 248. Fight with Fate. Mu Ling was facing Jian Wuchang. Jian Wuchang had a dignified appearance, although he was clad in simple attire and his face had an indifferent expression. But no one would dare to underestimate him. He had an absolute heroic aura. Get out of the way. Jian Wuchen was a man of few words and did not have any favorable impression of the 8th prince, but being a disciple of Yinqing City, he had no other choice. He received the order from an elder of his sect to follow the 8th prince's commands. Yi Shiwen also glanced at his opponents and did not give the slightest indication of losing this battle. If he was defeated, then who would save the disciples of Shuling Union? After all, they were using up their entire strength in maintaining such a massive array. Impossible. Mu Ling said and shot a glance at Yi Shiwen. But he was relieved to see that Yi Shiwen had not fallen under the wind. Jian Wuchen did not want to fight, but since Mu Ling was not ready to step aside, he had no choice but to engage in battle. He instantly waved his sword and released a rippling sword key that went across the sky, churning the clouds all the way, and descended upon Mu Ling. Jian Wuchen did not hesitate from using one of his best attacks on Mu Ling. Meanwhile, Mu Ling also did not hold back and displayed his best sword skill. Since his practice was based on consumption of dead ki, his sword attack was bound to be gloomy and ghastly. The whole sky as if trembled when these two sword attacks collided and set off storms in all directions. The spectators trembled when the strong auras of these two sword geniuses spread everywhere. Though their battle was not as outstanding as the battle between Yi Shiwen and the two tyrants, but there was not much difference either. After all, they were just one stage below. There were only a few experts of Truth 7th stage on the Demon Island, so no one would dare to look down on them. Boom! Two massive streams of sword ki severely collided and set off waves of a hellish aura in the surroundings. Jian Wuchen was a rare sword genius that appeared once in a century. But Mu Ling was also an unusual expert, and his powers were derived directly from hell. Suddenly, there appeared two diagrams in the sky, each representing the practiced sword intention of the two sword geniuses. It could be seen that both sword intentions were at the acme level, and as soon as they collided, they began to devour each other and resulted in a fearful competition between their respective ideal conditions. Boom! 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 The intensity of this battle was obviously inferior to the battle going on between Yi Shiwen and the two tyrants. Jian Wuchen's main motive was to save his fellow disciples of Yunqing City who were trapped inside the Shuling array, but Mu Ling promised Yi Shiwen that he would absolutely not allow anyone to pass. Inside the Shuling array, the evil blood god's spears were nailing the experts on the ground one by one. Mu Yuran was smiling and seemed very happy. He felt proud and elated while the disciples of the Imperial Union and the Wan True Union were crying pitifully. Almost everyone thought that this was going to be the end of Shuling Sect's younger generation. After all, why would Yi Shiwen show up and risk his life for the sake of some strangers? And even if he did, the 8th prince would not put a hold on his plan of getting rid of Shuling Sect's younger generation. There was an evil smile on Mu Yuran's face, because after this battle, who would dare to underestimate the Shuling Union? Boom! The 8th princes shot a glorious spurki which as if pierced through the sky and was firmly locked on Yi Shiwen. Clang! Wan Chengyao's blade instantly released a dazzling blade light that went howling towards Yi Shiwen. Two scary attacks were rushing towards Yi Shiwen, and everyone thought that he could certainly not withstand them. In fact, withstanding even one would be a miracle, let alone two. The earth-shattering attacks bulldozed numerous trees and set off air explosions everywhere. Boom! Yi Ziwen's long blade congealed a huge dragon that immediately rushed out. A terrible blast swept off after the collision, but Yi Shiwen did not move one bit. The aftermath and complementary waves of this world-shattering collision did not affect him at all. His incomparably tyrannical golden body was simply not budged by anything, and he continued to stand right where he was, with peerless self-confidence. Get out of the way! Compared to the 8th prince, Wan Qingyao was much more concerned about his men, and did not want them to die. There was a surge of dreadful energy that completely erupted from his body all of a sudden, and rushed towards Yi Shiwen like a sea of moving mountains of light. The Bladiki was rushing towards Yi Shiwen like surging waves of the sea, and at this time, the 8th prince also shot a deadly spear attack that released a dragon. It seemed as if a dragon was lurking in the waves, sometimes soaring up, sometimes diving in the waves. This scene was exceptionally awe-inspiring. Yi Ziwen's eyes revealed intense killing intention, aimed at both of these tyrants. If Wan Qingyao's Bladiki was like waves of the sea, then Yi Ziwen's Bladiki was sharp enough to cleave those waves. Yi Shiwen was able to sweep away any attack aimed at him, regardless of how vast and massive those attacks might be. At this time, the tyrannical might of gilded tyrant form, fully manifested and golden Zhen Yuan started to boil within Yi Ziwen's body. He appeared like a golden god of war, standing motionless in the raging waves of Bladiki, like an iron mountain. No matter how mighty those waves might be, were unable to move him even a step back. Yi Shiwen knew that this was not yet the most tragic phase of the battle. But his gilded tyrant form had also not been fully released either. He is really fighting with two tyrannical experts and is not pressed under the wind. Indeed, how is he able to block their joint attacks? This Yi Shiwen is too weird. Even if he dies today, he will still become a legend. It's still early to make such speculations. Warhawk said while observing the battle from sidelines, "This is just the beginning, and it's hard to say which side will come out as victorious." Ji Moonji and Wang Purple nodded. Their visions were naturally not like ordinary people. The Great Yu State has given a lot of elites to this world. The 8th prince, Yi Shiwen and Mu Yuran are all peerless elites. Warhawk said because it was not hidden from him that almost 100 experts were summoned from Great Yu State. Yuan School was famous for the shortage of elites in their younger generation, but Yi Shiwen alone was more than enough to compensate. The battle suddenly entered into the most intense phase. Yi Zaiwen's long blade released a sword intention that was faintly glowing with fluctuating world laws. Yi Shiwen was slowly revealing his cards. Now each and every one of his blade attacks transformed into ruthless sword intention, and also contained the ideal condition practiced by him to the Acme level. Clang! Boom! An enormous sword intention rushed across the sky and advanced towards the two tyrants. The 8th Prince and Wan Qingyao also resorted to their strongest attacks. Wan Qingyao's blade released endless waves of bladiki that seemed to be burdening the entire world. The 8th Prince's spear also released an endless barrage of spurki. Boom! The blast swept out in all directions. Even the atoms cracked open in this terrible collision that formed a blossoming mushroom cloud rising into the sky. Yi Zaiwen's hair was flying crazily in the wind. He did not stop even for a second and immediately waved his long blade, releasing a fearful blade light that went across the sky and collided with the enemy's joint attack. Boom! 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 The aftermath of the explosion crushed everything in the surroundings, sweeping away mountain peaks and the forest. Even the universe seemed to be collapsing in its wake. The two sides once again indulged in a superheated battle. Everyone's eyes were dazzled by this scene. They never expected to see such an intense battle. In fact, even the experts of Truth 8th Stage would call the level of this battle extremely tyrannical. This was a rare opportunity to witness such a battle, and if lost, then might not get another one. The battle was finally arriving in its most tragic phase. Shua! Yi Zaiwen's long blade clashed with the 8th Prince's spear, and the terrifying rippling energy wave swept towards a mountain peak and smashed it to pieces. But at this time, the suppression world law attached at the tip of the spear swept forward and pierced into Yi Zaiwen's body. Poochie! His golden blood splashed out, and he quickly went several steps back to avoid the next section of this attack. He is finally injured. Is this it? Is this the end of his fight with the fate? A disciple shouted excitedly. The 8th Prince roared and his tall body pressed down towards Yi Shiwen like a boundless mountain. This was the right moment to end this battle. He saw an opening in Yi Zaiwen's defenses and must make the final strike immediately to finish him off once and forever. You will die. No one is going to save you today. The 8th Prince sneered and swept his spear, setting off a terrible storm that transformed into a mass of light and rushed towards Yi Shiwen. Chapter 249. The 8th Prince nailed to the ground. You will die. No one is going to save you today. The 8th Prince sneered and swept his spear, setting off a terrible storm that transformed into a mass of light and rushed towards Yi Shiwen. If Gilded Tyrant Form's defense was not truly tyrannical, then Yi Shiwen would have already been defeated a long time ago. The spear thrust forward like a dragon, directly towards Yi Shiwen. Poochie! The 8th Prince's spear accurately pierced through the belly of Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen spat a mouthful of blood, and the blood also oozed out of the wound on his belly. This battle had already resulted in the destruction of the surrounding forest. Yi Shiwen immediately grabbed the spear with his hands, and the Gilded Tyrant Form activated to its extreme. Yi Zaiwen's might was so greatly strengthened that the 8th Prince never expected that he would not be able to pull out the spear from his body. While still clutching the spear with his hands, a spiraling golden energy surged out of his body and transformed into a huge dragon. It soared into the sky and instantly crashed into the 8th Prince's body. Bang! The 8th Prince was instantly sent flying. This attack was so terrifying that some of the bones in his body were broken, and he suddenly spouted a mouthful of blood. This was the so-called method of getting mutually wounded, where both of them were injured almost at the same time. But there appeared a look of terror in the eyes of the 8th Prince when he saw Yi Zaiwen's injuries healing at an unimaginable speed. In a flash, Yi Zaiwen's body was restored to its original state, and there were no traces of wounds anywhere on his body. Not just the 8th Prince, everyone present on the scene was dumbfounded. They saw that Yi Zaiwen's battle efficiency was also restored to its peak level. Only gilded tyrant form was not enough to give him confidence that he could kill those two simultaneously. The main source of his confidence was the Phoenix regeneration technique. Yi Shiwen's combat effectiveness was not inferior to them, and so long as he continued to recover unceasingly, he would be able to kill both of them sooner or later. This was the only method capable of beheading both of them at the same time. If Yi Shiwen did not succeed this time, then it would be even more difficult the next time. Yi Shiwen did not want to fall short, and his present tactic was trading wound for wound. The fast regeneration ability of the Phoenix regeneration technique gave him such confidence. There was another way to exhaust them to death, although it would possibly hurt Yi Ziwen's vitality and shorten his lifespan, but right now he had no choice. He must get rid of the 8th prince and Wan Qingyao, otherwise it would be disastrous if Hua Menghan and Qin Ruochen fell into their hands. Earlier, he had heard false rumor of them falling into the hands of the enemy, but it might become a tragic reality. This needed to be done today. Yi Shiwen did not have the luxury of trying next time. Not to mention he was aware of Wan Qingyao's mentality. He was even worse than the 8th prince since no moral barriers could stop him from sinning if he felt offended. He would continue to wreak havoc throughout the island, and must be exterminated today. Saving the world from these two psychos was worth losing some of his lifespan. If he was at Truth's 7th stage, then killing these tyrants would be a lot easier. Yi Shiwen showed no hesitation and rushed straight towards Wan Qingyao. Boom! Yi Ziwen's long blade went towards Wan Qingyao's body. The blade light released from the long blade invoked suppression law of the world, and as if moved forward to crush the universe. Yi Shiwen had added divinity to the Bladiki, and that was the reason why the whole world shook in the presence of this divine attack. Shatter! Wan Qingyao's blade released a large stream of blade light towards the incoming attack. Shwa! The horrifying collision turned numerous trees into ashes, and Wan Qingyao felt his hands go numb all of a sudden. He cursed in his heart and did not know what kind of strange power was being used by Yi Shiwen, but his attacks contained extreme might, the force of hundreds of millions of jin, as if released to chop down the stars in the sky. Missing Moon Beheader. Yi Ziwen's first blade attack had not even stagnated when he made the second blade attack the very next moment. Boom! Another blade attack fiercely pounded on Wan Qingyao's blade, and the terrifying force contained in it shook him thoroughly. Boom! The third blade attack instantly changed its direction, and sliced its way into Wan Qingyao's body. He suddenly spat a mouthful of blood, and was extremely depressed in his heart. Yi Ziwen's blade skill was too weird because he caught the opportunity and made 3 blade attacks one after another, and each attack was mightier than the previous one. This blade skill was called Missing Moon Beheader, and its key point was to find an opening in the opponent's defenses. As soon as there was an opening, the practitioner could use his strongest blade attack. And while waiting for an opening, the practitioner could continue to use blade attacks one after another to keep the opponent busy, while constantly increasing the might of the attacks to confuse the opponent, going all the way up to the 9th blade attack. Of course, the 9th blade attack would contain an earth-shattering might, much more than the might of the previous blade attacks. However, Wan Qingyao was a skilled fighter, and he immediately dodged the next blade attack to get out the barrage of blade attacks coming one after another. He dodged the 4th blade attack, and did not know that the 6th blade attack might have ended his life. Ordinary experts were unable to display the full might of Missing Moon Beheader, but in the hands of Yi Shiwen, who was a peerless blade master, and had comprehended the ideal condition of this technique, it was truly frightening. Wan Qingyao quickly retreated far away from Yi Shiwen, but at this time, the 8th prince suddenly rushed towards Yi Shiwen. The spectators were afraid to blink, because they might miss something important. They were not just watching the battle, but also observing the skills used by these 3 tyrannical experts and learning new things. Now they knew that their assumptions were wrong. Instead of falling under the wind, Yi Shiwen actually had the upper hand, of course, only when he was fighting one opponent at a time. Not to mention, none of the 2 tyrants was a match of Yi Shiwen in a one fight. However, whenever the 8th prince and Wan Qingyao teamed up, Yi Shiwen was forced to switch to defense-styled combat. At this time, Wan Qingyao was feeling an uncontrollable rage surging in his heart. It was a shame for him that in spite of being at Truth 8th peak, He was pushed to such an extent by an expert that was 2 levels below him. If the 8th prince did not lend a hand then. Wan Qingyao's anger-filled roars resounded throughout the sky and the air began to boil like boiling water. Countless air explosions took place in the sky, and it seemed as if the surrounding space would crack open any time. Wan Qingyao was releasing a terrifying imposing aura, and some spectators felt as if their eardrums would shatter any moment now. Wan Qingyao went all out and his fearful imposing aura instantly locked on Yi Shiwen. He did not waste time and immediately shot a rippling blade light that rushed towards Yi Shiwen at a lightning-fast speed. Boom! Yi Shiwen tried to block this attack, but was sent flying and his ribs were completely shattered. Yi Shiwen felt an intense pain raiding his brain. World domination. The 8th prince did not miss this chance and directly impaled Yi Shiwen with his spear. Boom! Yi Shiwen was directly nailed to the ground. Seeing Yi Shiwen in this state, the 8th prince laughed and a grim look appeared on his face. Last time, he was nailed to the ground and that brought a lifelong shame for him, but he took revenge today by doing the same to Yi Shiwen. However, his pleased mood did not last long because Yi Ziwen suddenly shot his palm, releasing a mass of spiraling energy that pounded on his chest and sent him flying. He paid the price for being arrogant and underestimating Yi Shiwen, and also letting his guard down. He spurted a mouthful of blood and fell heavily on the ground. Yi Shiwen pulled out the spear from his body, and his wounds healed almost instantaneously. The experts who saw this scene held their breaths and simply did not believe their eyes. How was this possible? How could he have such an ability which simply defied the heavens' will? Most importantly, was it literally impossible to kill Yi Shiwen? No wonder he was so full of confidence and challenged these 2 tyrannical experts. Yi Ziwen's hands were instantly enveloped by a kind of seething golden energy. Whoosh! An awful piercing sound echoed throughout the sky when Yi Shiwen threw the spear towards the 8th prince, who was still lying on the ground. Boom! The spear descended upon the 8th prince and nailed him to the ground. Yi Shiwen was quite far away, and did not know what kind of expression appeared on his face right now. Perhaps he was excited to be nailed to the ground by his own spear? In fact, the 8th prince's face was flushed red with shame and embarrassment. After all, this was the 2nd time he was nailed to the ground by Yi Shiwen. Not to mention, he did not have the Phoenix regeneration technique to heal his wounds. However, at this time, Yi Shiwen did not get a chance to give the finishing blow to the 8th prince, because Wan Qingyao immediately appeared in front of him. The atmosphere began to disintegrate when these 2 collided, and several experts trembled with fear and excitement. If they had not seen this battle from the beginning, they would have continued to think that Yi Shiwen was just an expert of Truth's 6th peak, and his battle efficiency was comparable to the experts of Truth's 7th peak. But now they knew that there was no one on this island that could be his rival. The long blade danced in Yi Ziwen's hands. A huge dragon roared and flew into the sky, and it seemed like its fierce claws would tear the sky to shreds. Chapter 250. Frightened, the long blade danced in Yi Ziwen's hands. A huge dragon roared and flew into the sky, and it seemed like its fierce claws would tear the sky to shreds. Boom! A fearsome blast engulfed the sky and instantly formed a tornado so massive that the spectators felt as if they would be sucked into it, even though they were observing from afar. Wan Qingyao's blade light gave rise to chaos in the sky and arrived in front of Yi Shiwen. With a flick of his hand, Yi Shiwen diverted the trajectory of the blade light. The 2 tyrannical experts then engaged in a terrible battle, and none of them seemed to hold back. They were no longer using complex martial techniques to show off their skills, rather they were now resorting to make use of brute force and inherent energy. Wan Qingyao was relying on his higher level, while Yi Shiwen was relying on Gilded Tyrant form and Phoenix regeneration technique to sustain such a world-shattering battle. The spectators felt as if the battle potential of these 2 experts was enough to cause the end of this world. They were nothing like the mediocre experts from their respective levels. One could see that whether it was Wan Qingyao, Yi Shiwen, the 8th prince, Warhawk, or the remaining 2 super experts, all of them were basically outstanding experts even among the group of peerless geniuses summoned to this island. In a few years, they would surely be sitting at the top of not just their own generation, but a generation above them. Moreover, a clash between them was bound to happen sooner or later. Initially, everyone thought that Yi Shiwen didn't belong among these tyrannical experts and would certainly die, but now they did not think so. Yi Shiwen had already shown enough strength to stand among them. Yi Shiwen did not fall under the wind, even while facing those two tyrants at the same time. What else did they need as a proof of his tyrannical strength? Yi Ziwen's performance was not just strong, he actually managed to injure both Wan Chengyao and the 8th prince. And judging from the battle, they could clearly see that in a one-on-one battle, Yi Shiwen was superior to both of them. In fact, even Warhawk would have been unable to perform this well if he was the one battling these two tyrants. Therefore, it was obvious that no one on this island could alone beat Yi Shiwen. Not to mention it seemed literally impossible to kill him since he had some kind of mystical regeneration technique that defied the heavens. Yi Shiwen was confident that he could kill them both, and also knew that even if the super experts teamed up to fight against these two tyrants, might not be able to defeat them. No wonder the super experts did not dare to participate in this battle even if they wanted to, and were just watching from sidelines. He and only he could do this. And he must do this. Of course, if Yi Shiwen was at Truth 8th stage, then this battle would have ended in the very beginning. Then, Yi Shiwen would be so powerful that if he desired, he could single-handedly wipe out each and every expert from the face of this island. What happened? Was it not you who wanted me to come out? Yi Shiwen said in a cold voice. See, I came out to test your skill, but it seems like a waste of time. Yi Shiwen completely released his terrifying aura, and appeared just like a god in the sky. The divinity was crawling all over his body, and the look in his eyes was extremely called as if a god of destruction was looking at his prey. In Yi Ziwen's godlike presence, everyone looked no different than ant-like existences. Yi Shiwen decided not to wait any longer, and took advantage of the 8th prince being presently nailed to the ground. He launched a full-scale attack to kill Wan Qingyao in one fell swoop. Otherwise, going on like this was not favorable for him. The Phoenix regeneration technique was not completely invincible, and involved large energy consumption. He was still at the peak of Truth 6th stage, and the ratio of consumption was certainly large in comparison to that of an expert of Truth 8th stage. Yi Shiwen looked just like a god to everyone present on the scene. His whole body was covered with endless divinity and exuding fearful rays of golden light in all directions. At this time, he looked like a being who could subjugate anyone in the 10,000 worlds. Wan Chengyao looked at the godlike being standing in the sky and understood that he must immediately release all his power, otherwise he would not be able to survive the next attack. He was curious to know the secret of Yi Ziwen's strange power but was scared of death. This was the first time he was scared of losing his life. However, Wan Chengyao was an arrogant guy. He was destined to become one of the leaders of the Southeast region and rule above countless people. He also completely released his power, and shot his mightiest blade light towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen used his long blade to first block this blade light, then instantly congealed the invincible might of gilded tyrant form in his palms and tore that blade light to shreds. The spectators felt as if they were transported to the prehistoric era, and were watching a battle between two war gods. It was like a battle between a golden martial god and a devil. One of the two was instantly regenerating his severed body parts, while the other was totally ignoring his severe injuries. Not to mention, their prestige was on the line, so the rest of the world could just meet the doom. They couldn't care less and were fully indulged in this frenzy. On the one hand, Wan Chengyao looked crazier with a crazed look flashing in his bloodshot eyes, and was putting everything on the line to get rid of Yi Ziwen, while on the other hand, Yi Shiwen looked calm and composed and his golden eyes were focused on the prey. The golden divinity not only granted him a tyrannical body, but also influenced his perception and charisma. Right now, anyone would say without hesitation that Yi Shiwen was much more powerful than Wan Chengyao. I can dominate people, I can manipulate anyone. I am a supreme being who was born to rule. You are nothing in front of me. Wan Chengyao roared with rage. The Wan True Union was just a way to prove his dominance to the younger generation of the 10 countries of the Southeast region. It was just the first step towards dominating the entire Southeast region by subjugating these peerless geniuses of the younger generation. Then, within few hundred years, he might become a huge presence, far above the reach of the 10 countries of Southeast region. It could be said that his ambition was far ahead of the ambition of the 8th prince. However, just when he was going to be successful in the most critical step, he had to face an obstacle like Yi Shiwen. And before his ambition could take a real form, it was basically crippled by Yi Shiwen. He was so angry right now that he not only wanted to chop down Yi Shiwen into pieces, but also wanted to annihilate his soul, so that he would never be able to reincarnate. Wan Chengyao's imposing aura was increasing crazily, fueled by his rage, and it eventually became almost comparable to Yi Ziwen's divine aura. You actually think that someone like you can dominate people? Yi Shiwen sneered. How foolish can you be? You think strength is enough to dominate people? I don't even feel like educating you on the topic. Anyway, it's going to be a waste of time to educate a dead man. Yi Shiwen finally understood why Wan Qingyao and that 8th prince had teamed up. There was a popular saying in his past life. Birds of a feather flock together. These two were ambitious fools who wanted to dominate people with sheer power. Well, they were not completely mistaken about the basic concept of domination since this world was governed by strength, but Yi Shiwen was not someone from this world. He was certainly not someone who would allow someone, certainly not such idiots, to dominate him. Boom. Yi Shiwen instantly rushed forward like a missile, and his terrifying speed caused sonic booms. Horrifying. The experts could not help but praise Yi Ziwen's power. They had to move far back to stay away from the aftermath of the supersonic waves. Save us. The pitiful screams transmitting from within the Shuling array gradually disappeared. One by one, all of the trapped disciples had been nailed to the ground. Mu Yuran was standing on the side, and his face looked extremely pale and covered in sweat. One could imagine the consumption of Zhen Yuan for maintaining such a massive array. At this time, he was literally out of energy but didn't seem worried because almost all of the enemy disciples were now dead. After hearing the last screams of a few surviving members of his alliance, Wan Qingyao got even angrier and attacked Yi Shiwen. Die. A war cry thundered in the sky and Yi Shiwen dived towards Wan Qingyao like a god descending to the earth. His hands transformed into 2 coiling dragons and swept out to crush the world. The whole world rippled as if suppressed by the 2 mighty dragons. Yi Ziwen's fearful imposing aura was suffocating Wan Qingyao, but his complexion appeared grimmer than that of the 8th prince. Both experts once again engaged in a superheated battle, almost disregarding their own safety, by using most of their energy reserves in the attacks. Wan Qingyao waved his blade, and released a fearful bladiki mixed with his imposing aura. Yi Shiwen again tore the mass of bladiki with his bare hands. He had already removed the limiter and fully unleashed Gilded Tyrant form at the cost of fast consumption of Zhen Yuan. He was all prepared to end this battle very soon. The spectators felt their hearts almost jumping out of their mouths. Perhaps this was the most tyrannical battle to take place on this island so far. Puchi. Wan Chengyao's blade suddenly opened a huge wound on Yi Ziwen's golden body. However, at this moment, he was unable to dodge in time and suffered a punch on his chest that instantly made a dent on his solid chest. He spurted a mouthful of blood, and was sent flying far away. Yi Ziwen's wound healed instantly, and he rushed towards Wan Qingyao and once again thrust his palm. Yi Shiwen had abandoned complex moves, and was focusing on most primitive moves. Each time Yi Shiwen was injured by Wan Qingyao, the counterattack would also cause him injuries. However, Yi Ziwen's instant healing ability was constantly crushing the morale of Wan Qingyao. Wan Qingyao felt like vomiting blood when he saw that all his efforts were basically useless. Yi Ziwen's golden body was spotless without a single scratch anywhere. Wan Qingyao was not a fool and even he could see that his own attacks, if not powerful enough, were not able to injure Yi Ziwen's golden body. And whenever he put extra energy and effort to strengthen his attack to injure Yi Shiwen, he would face a counterattack from Yi Shiwen at the same time, making the whole thing counterproductive since Yi Shiwen was somehow able to heal his own wounds instantly. Yi Shiwen was defying common sense and his battle strategy was flawless. Wan Qingyao's rage was nowhere to be seen. In fact, it was now replaced by fear and frustration. Perhaps no one in the crowd of spectators was capable enough to block Wan Qingyao's attacks, But even such attacks were useless in front of Yi Ziwen's flawless battle strategy. Wan Chengyao had already lost the confidence of winning. He was scared to attack Yi Shiwen, thinking that the next counterattack might end his own life. He could neither run away nor attack. Of course, he certainly could not stand idly and think. Your tyranny ends here and now. Yi Shiwen sneered and rushed forward. From a distant place, the eighth prince suddenly began to shout, and his spear also began to emit rays of horrifying light. He was holding his spear and trying to pull it out of his body to break free, and immediately rushed to rescue Wan Chengyao. Wan Chengyao's face revealed a look of pleasant surprise. He thought that he must survive until the eighth prince would break free. Then both of them would team up to kill Yi Shiwen. Perhaps he still had not noticed that he was thinking like a coward and had already lost the battle of wits. He had fallen into the well-planned trap of Yi Shiwen. Right now he was scared and had also lost confidence. He could not even contemplate a scenario of alone defeating Yi Shiwen. He was subconsciously depending on the eighth prince's help, and this thought process was surely going to bring his doom. His invincible courage and confidence had been thoroughly crushed by Yi Shiwen. He was no longer a tyrant whose ambition was to dominate the world. Now he was just a pathetic warrior who had lost faith in his own strength and was relying on someone else to save his life. Chapter 251. Execution of a tyrant. He no longer had that previous courage and invincible aura. His frame of mind had changed from tyranny to cowardice. Wan Chengyao was roaring out of desperation. He felt empty inside. The dominating heart of a tyrant had already been crushed by Yi Shiwen in front of everyone. Now he was just an empty shell of his previous self. Unfortunately, this battle is over. We are witnessing the fall of a tyrant. Warhawk shook his head and said, "Indeed." Ji Moon and Wang Purple also nodded. The three super experts were standing on the front line with hands crossed behind their backs. A tyrant like Wan Chengyao is truly a terrifying existence. He is at the peak of truth 8th stage, and is certainly at the pinnacle of the younger generation in the entire southeast region. Even I cannot dare to say that I can beat him, and note my point, he is stronger than Yi Shiwen. Yes, Yi Shiwen is merely at the peak of truth 6th stage, but his body is extremely tough and intrepid. This is the main reason why he is able to fight with two experts of truth 8th stage. Warhawk's vision could be called sharp and sinister. He had seen through Yi Ziwen's secret. But the point was that he and the other spectators were able to understand this fact only after actually seeing Yi Shiwen in battle. And the eighth prince and Wan Chengyao did not have such luxury since they had already blundered by challenging Yi Shiwen. Warhawk was confident that if he was at the peak of truth 8th stage, then he might be able to fight with one expert of truth 8th peak, but certainly not two. But who was Wan Chengyao? Yes, an expert at the pinnacle of truth 8th stage, a super genius and a tyrannical existence who did not think twice before killing people. One could see that fighting such a ruthless expert was not an easy task, not to mention Yi Shiwen dealt with actually two such tyrants. In simple words, Yi Shiwen went against the heavens' will in front of so many people. Wan Chenyao's real strength is actually slightly more than the strength of Yi Shiwen, but unfortunately, he seems to have lost his courage and ambition. He succumbed to fear, and even if he survives this battle, perhaps he will never be able to regain his confidence and glory. Those who heard Warhawk's commentary nodded, and continued to look at the scene in which Wan Chengyao had completely fallen under the wind. Yi Shiwen was constantly using Phoenix regeneration, and was not afraid of anything. He went ahead bravely and unscrupulously shot. Wan Chengyao's attacks were still tyrannical, but even if Yi Shiwen was defeated 10 times, he would stand up 10 times in a completely healed state, whereas if Wan Chengyao was defeated even once, he would start to act all timid and scared. He had completely lost his motivation to beat Yi Shiwen, and was simply biding time for the 8th prince to come to his rescue. The screams had fully disappeared within Shuling Array, because all of the besieged disciples of the Imperial Union and the Wan True Union had been crucified to death by the evil blood god. Wish! The entire array suddenly collapsed and vanished into thin air. Mu Yuren's complexion was extremely pale, as if there wasn't a trace of blood left in his body. His energy had been completely drained by Shuling Array, and not just him. Even his fellow disciples of Shuling Union were also in a similar state. Some were in more serious state and immediately fainted. Shuling Array's might was outstanding, so the energy requirement was certainly going to be big. In fact, the energy consumption was so huge that even a high-level expert like Mu Yuran came close to draining his entire Zhenyuan and blood. However, at this time, no one dared to take advantage of Shuling Union's weakened state. Even those who normally hated the Shuling Union, and were silently in favor of the Imperial Union, and the one true Union did not dare to act because the battle was not yet over. They were waiting to see the final outcome. Not to forget, there was a possibility that Yi Shiwen appeared for the sake of Shuling Union, so they were being cautious. Also on another battlefield, Mu Ling and Jane Wuchen were engaged in a superheated battle, though not as destructive as the other one, but there was no less brutality involved in this one as well. At this time, Jian Wuchen growled. His whole body was covered with blood, and his bones were truncated at some places. Mu Ling's body was also covered in wounds. There was an exceptionally terrible wound on his chest. This was really a battle between two evenly matched opponents, two veteran sword masters. Mu Ling raised his sword and summoned a yellow river that appeared behind him, and instantly flowed towards Jian Wuchen. Mu Ling's battle efficiency was increasing continuously, and yet there were no signs of a breakthrough, but his attacks were getting fiercer. Jian Wuchen wasn't deterred by this, and he immediately waved his sword to congeal clouds of sword ki around him to protect himself from the onslaught of the Yellow River. Boom! Even the terrible collision like this could not compel these two men to retreat. A bit more. Mu Ling's battle efficiency finally broke through the boundary of Truth's 7th stage, under the heavy pressure of this insane battle. His imposing aura suddenly stepped into the Truth 8th stage. The spectators who were paying attention to this battle were suddenly stunned. This decisive battle of life and death was between two equally matched opponents, but Mu Ling actually benefited from it. Shua! Mu Ling's sword came very close to Jian Wuchen's neck, and stopped right before it was about to behead him. "I do not want to kill you," Mu Ling said. He had defeated Jian Wuchen, but he also admired this man's talent and fighting spirit. Mu Ling admired him as a fellow swordsman, and had also heard from Yi Shiwen that Jian Wuchen was actually an honest man with a very clean and pure soul. Indeed, he was nothing more than a sword slave of the 8th prince, but today, this would change. And someday he would become a truly outstanding hero. "Someday, I will find you and we will finish our unfinished business," Jian Wuchen said and turned around to leave. Everyone watched his back profile as he slowly disappeared into the horizon. His fellow disciples were already dead, so there was no point in staying here. Yi Shiwen smiled when he noticed that Mu Ling stepped into the Truth 8th stage. Having a strong reinforcement surely strengthened his confidence. Wan Qingyao was startled by this, but it made him even more desperate. He shouted like a crazy guy and shot a rippling blade light at Yi Shiwen. Yi Ziwen's golden hands caught that rippling blade light and tore it apart. Then he immediately flew towards Wan Qingyao like a bullet fired from a gun. Yi Ziwen's palm struck out horizontally and simultaneously pounded on Wan Qingyao's chest. Bang! Wan Qingyao was sent flying, and the tremendous force contained in his attack broke many of his ribs. Wan Qingyao seemed to have been cornered by Yi Shiwen, and appeared like a madman who was desperately fighting a battle for his own survival. He rushed forward like a lunatic to maliciously attack Yi Shiwen. Moreover, the 8th prince was almost done removing the seal from his spear. He did not take too long to do this, which indicated the extent of his skill and terrifying might. Wan Qingyao was like a ferocious beast in general. He disregarded the consumption of energy, and released a black-colored blade light that looked like a lightning from hell as it went straight towards Yi Shiwen. "Now you die," Wan Qingyao roared while stubbornly staring at Yi Shiwen. He seemed quite confident in this attack. Yi Shiwen smirked and stuck out his hands as if to tear the space itself. The golden divinities poured out of his hands, and crawled towards the black lightning. Boom! The two attacks collided and began to devour each other, setting off layer upon layer of air storms in all directions. When his best attack failed as well, Wan Qingyao's complexion paled. Yi Shiwen sneered but noticed that the 8th prince was about to break free, So he must kill Wan Qingyao as soon as possible. Yi Shiwen rushed forward and seemed in a hurry, but his mind was unusually calm. Bang! Yi Ziwen's palm pounded on the back of Wan Qingyao. Wan Qingyao was directly sent flying. His grandiose stature flew upside down, and right at this moment, Yi Shiwen suddenly jumped in the air, twisted his waist, and launched a kick at Wan Qingyao from above almost instantly. Ah! The eighth prince shouted and finally managed to pull out the spear from his own body. He stood up and looked around to find Yi Shiwen, but at this time, a shocking scene greeted his eyes. Yi Shiwen raised his foot up in the air, as if to split Wan Qingyao's body into two halves with a kick. But Wan Qingyao obviously wouldn't allow him to achieve his wish. He immediately released a blade light, but even that could not stop Yi Ziwen's kick. The divinities concentrated on his foot instantly dispersed the blade light, and his kick directly landed on Wan Qingyao's body. Bang! A horrible sound of breaking bones resounded everywhere. Wan Qingyao screamed pitifully as his chest was completely crushed by Yi Shiwen. The divinities instantly entered his body and churned his internal organs. Wan Qingyao struggled a bit, but ultimately could not withstand the loss of vitality and died on the spot. What? The eighth prince's eyes opened wide in disbelief when he saw how Wan Qingyao was trampled to death by Yi Shiwen. It didn't take him too long to set himself free, but he never expected to see such an unbelievable turn of events. Now there's no one left to interfere. Prepare yourself for the inevitable death, because today, I will make sure that no one comes to save you. Yi Shiwen looked coldly at the eighth prince and said. It was obvious that he would not allow the eighth prince to escape this time. Chapter 252. You were unqualified. The eighth prince was startled and angry at the same time. He never thought that an expert like Wan Qingyao would meet such a horrifying death, by getting trampled to death. Setting sun. Oblique wind. Blood. Broken bones. Everything was outlining a desolate scene in the battlefield. Yi Shiwen was not in a hurry to kill the eighth prince. He was taking advantage of this time to restore his power, by constantly mobilizing Phoenix regeneration technique. The experts who were observing from the sidelines only saw Yi Shiwen going forward bravely, but they never noticed that he was also actually injured. The strength of these two tyrants was far above his own, so sustaining some injuries during the clashes was obvious because gilded tyrant form could only give a certain amount of protection to him at a time. Then he again had to rely on Phoenix regeneration to heal. However, these two techniques were not invincible or infinite. A moment ago when he was giving the finishing blow to Wan Qingyao, Yi Shiwen accumulated a lot of bruises on his body and had no choice but to heal up using Phoenix regeneration. In addition, it was an undeniable fact that he was unable to kill these two tyrants simultaneously. The eighth prince was stuck in a stunned pose for a while, and this allowed Yi Shiwen to rest for some time. When Yi Ziwen's breathing calmed down, he looked coldly at the eighth prince and said, By now, you certainly wouldn't have imagined that today I will send you to hell. Ha 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 ha. The eighth prince laughed loudly and wasn't intimidated by this. Today, I will offer you and your people as sacrifices to my cause. The eighth prince's voice thundered as his spear transformed into a dragon and crawled forward as if to pierce the sky. Radiant stars dazzling at the tip of his spear as if buzzed and advanced towards Yi Shiwen. The eighth prince was not discouraged and seemed more tenacious and sinister than Wan Qingyao. He needed to get rid of Yi Shiwen as soon as possible because Mu Ling had unexpectedly become a possible threat to his life. And if Yi Shiwen teamed up with Mu Ling, then that would certainly bring his doom. He had no other way out. Yi Ziwen's golden hands effortlessly tore off the dazzling spear attack. And the very next moment, his golden palms shot forward and swept out a vast golden light which crawled towards the eighth prince. Poof! This golden light was so fast that it instantly approached the eighth prince and pounded on his chest. He spat a mouthful of blood and quickly retreated several steps to neutralize the enormous force contained in Yi Ziwen's attack. Phoenix regeneration granted an astonishing recovery speed, though at the cost of Zhen Yuan, or vitality in extreme situations. But in a matter of few breaths, Yi Shiwen had already reached his peak condition, whereas the eighth prince had been injured twice by Yi Shiwen. Not to mention he had been wounded by his own spear, and he had already spent a considerable amount of energy to set himself free. In other words, the 8th prince was certainly not at his peak condition right now, and was actually at a disadvantage. However, Yi Shiwen was in peak condition though at the cost of his vitality. Phoenix regeneration had already been displayed to the acme level by Yi Shiwen, granting him unimaginable strength and battle efficiency. Yi Ziwen's imposing aura climbed to the peak and golden divinity was surging in his boiling blood. Although the 8th prince was roaring again and again, and deploying various secret technique one after another but was still being defeated again and again by Yi Ziwen's golden palm attacks. In the face of absolute strength, all secret techniques were like floating clouds. It was simply impossible for the 8th prince to be an opponent of Yi Shiwen in such an injured state. Yi Ziwen's attacks were getting faster and faster, and at the same time, he had been constantly using Phoenix regeneration to stay at his peak condition at all times while launching attacks nonstop. Bang! The 8th prince's blood-bathed body was again sent flying. To spectators, Yi Shiwen radically looked like a fearless warrior, who was not only brave but unscrupulous. This observation was because of a simple fact that the rate of recovery was far beyond their imagination. But the same was not true for the 8th prince, and his pitiful appearance was visible to all. The 8th prince's battle efficiency slowly began to reduce. And finally, he was completely suppressed by Yi Shiwen. Everyone saw the angry expression on the 8th prince's face changing to a shocked one when he was suddenly trampled by Yi Shiwen. He absolutely did not have any strength to fight back. Kaka! 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 The 8th prince's bones gradually cracked one by one, and some bones protruded out of his torn-off skin. Now his body looked like a tattered bag of blood and cracked bones. Everyone looked at each other, and was speechless. Was this time for the curtain to drop? Bang! The 8th prince had been brutally trampled by Yi Shiwen. But Yi Shiwen did not stop there and kicked him so fiercely that he was sent flying miles away and crashed into a mountain. Yi Shiwen immediately approached the 8th prince, lifted his hand and landed a malicious slap on his face while holding his neck with the other hand. Wake up, open your eyes and properly witness the final moments of your pathetic life. Today no one is here to save your ass. You are doomed. Yi Shiwen said coldly. Wait! A loud shout resounded throughout the sky. A youth, who appeared to be 20 years old and clad in ordinary clothes, suddenly descended from the sky. Yi Shiwen suddenly raised his eyebrows and asked, Again? Who are you? Emperor Chun. The man said proudly, What do you want? Do you also want to fight with me? Yi Shiwen pointed a finger at him and coldly asked. Yi Shiwen was vigilant and activated a sealing-type Zhen method to seal the energy within the 8th prince's body. He was also mobilizing Phoenix regeneration technique to maintain a continuous restoration of his injuries and battle efficiency. Let him go. That's all I want. Emperor Chun said openly without hiding his intention. That's impossible. Yi Shiwen almost instantly said, leaving no scope for negotiation. How dare you go against my words? Emperor Chun said coldly. Humph. Am I supposed to care? Yi Shiwen tightened the grip on the 8th prince's neck. Yi Ziwen's iron-like claw was almost on the verge of crushing his neck. Yi Shiwen. A gentle voice sounded from afar. Yi Shiwen turned his head and saw the same Taoist priest he had met earlier. Qing Su descended from the sky like a celestial immortal. Qing Su, you are also with him? Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes and said. He said this in a cold and rough tone, and no longer felt like considering Qing Su as his friend. If possible, I would like you to spare the 8th prince's life. Qing Su sighed and said in a somewhat embarrassed tone. You have already killed one rare genius of the southeast region. At least spare the 8th prince. Haha. Yi Shiwen laughed loudly then said. You have chosen such a nice time to come out as a peacemaker. I wonder why not you appeared back when these two so-called rare geniuses had teamed up to kill me. Where were you then? I expect you to give some proper reason. Because you were unqualified at that time. Emperor Chen said in a cold voice. And what he said was a fact. After all, who would have thought that Yi Shiwen would display such terrifying battle efficiency? Indeed, he was counted among well-known figures, but he was still not considered on the level of super experts. Yi Shiwen smirked. He once again witnessed the law of the strong and how obvious it was in this world. His own life was not worth saving before this battle, but now that he defeated these two tyrants, he suddenly started to get special attention from others. So these two did not feel like interfering earlier because the 8th Prince and Wan Qingyao were great powerhouses and rare geniuses. Listen, Yi Shiwen, these things are very complex and includes the battle involving our southeast region with foreign powers. I hope you can show mercy and spare his life. Qing Su said with a sigh. Don't make me repeat myself. You are asking for impossible. Yi Shiwen shook his head. I certainly do not know much about this battle you talk about, but I know that he is a poisonous snake. I don't want any future trouble, so sparing his life is out of the question. And listen to this and deeply engrave it in your heart. You are unqualified to tell me what to do. Yi Shiwen turned towards Emperor Chen and said in a grim voice. And as he said these words, he used his other hand to grasp the 8th Prince's head. The next instant, the 8th Prince's head was crushed and dropped as a pile of brain paste and blood on the ground. You are courting death. Do you think that I will not kill you? Emperor Chen's imposing aura instantly enveloped Yi Ziwen's body. He was angry because no one had ever dared to not give him face, but Yi Shiwen dared to kill the 8th Prince right in front of his eyes. Emperor Chen's breath was extremely formidable. Perhaps he was on Truth 9th stage, though his inner state showed signs of instability. But he should be more powerful than the 8th Prince. Then you are free to try. Yi Shiwen followed the rule of tit for tat, and instantly summoned a layer of golden divinity over his body. His imposing aura also erupted out of his body at the same time. Well, since it has come to this, we will say nothing else. Qing Su could feel Yi Ziwen's anger. He was finding it difficult to stand on the opposite of Yi Shiwen. If before he had stood in support of Yi Shiwen, then it was perhaps okay to interfere now, but his current interference was no different from taking advantage of his friendship with Yi Shiwen. Emperor Chen's fiery eyes were staring at Yi Shiwen, and it seemed like he would launch an attack at any time. Yi Shiwen did not dare to relax even for a moment, because Emperor Chen was extremely strong. However, it was true that the opposite party did not have grounds to blame Yi Shiwen. If Yi Shiwen had not killed the 8th Prince, then he would certainly have become a major threat to him, or his family in the future. Yi Shiwen would obviously first ensure his own safety, otherwise, why would he care about the well-being of the southeast region? Everyone was stunned while witnessing this scene. Who was this Emperor Chen? Almost nobody knew him, and had never heard of him since coming to this island. On the contrary, Warhawk was a bit surprised when he saw Emperor Chen and seemed to know his identity. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.